This program is recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM. This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Council meeting.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Monday, August 22nd session of the Eau Claire City Council. During its Monday night session, the Council conducts public hearings and public discussions in which we ask for your input. That input helps us make decisions mostly at our legislative session, which convenes tomorrow afternoon in this room at 4 p.m. We do welcome all of you who are joining us in chambers tonight, and as always, we are grateful to Community Television for broadcasting and streaming these proceedings for people who cannot attend in person. We do have some interesting items on our agenda for which I will just briefly review the protocol. After I introduce an item on the agenda, by the way, printed agendas are at the back of chambers if you would care to follow along. After I introduce an item, city staff gives us some background, and we often ask a few questions about the item to clarify a few things that we need to do. But we get through our questions quickly in order to get to the public input period. We don't draw names or I don't call on people. We have found over the years that people just politely come up to the podium one at a time and take turns. It just works out. So don't worry. Everyone who wants to say something will have a chance to say something. We do institute a 5-minute speaking limit, and we help you count off that 5 minutes with a light system. There's a green light at the podium. That's the beginning of your 5 minutes. A yellow light means you have 1 minute left, and a red light means your 5 minutes have expired, at which time I'll politely ask you to draw your comments to a close. You do not need to take the 5 minutes, but they are there for you should you need them. Afterwards, sometimes we have questions of the speaker. It's helpful for us if you just linger at the podium for a moment until I ask if there are questions. Our questions are not meant to put you on the spot or make you uncomfortable. They just oftentimes help us clarify a point you were trying to make. We want to be sure that what you have to say, we accepted clearly and we understood what it is that was on your mind. Lastly, if you have something you want us to know, but you're uncomfortable speaking, you can write a comment, and there's some blue papers at the back of chambers. You can write out your comment and then leave the papers there. We receive all of those written comments via email by tomorrow morning, and they are given equal weight to anything you may say standing at the podium tonight. Some people just feel more comfortable writing down their thoughts, and we get all of those compliments of our city clerk. So, and if you have questions or if you need help, if you can't hear us, if something is bothering you, you can ask Ms. Merle right here, who will help you with almost everything in your life, by the way. But certainly things having to do with this meeting. So with that little introduction, we'll get going on our agenda tonight, which begins with item 1, a public hearing on the proposed ordinance change rezoning property at the southeast corner of Highway 12 and North Town Hall Road. Mr. Tefty.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is the site located off US Highway 12 at North Town Hall Road. There is residential zoning to the south. There's commercial or industrial zoning on the other 3 directions around the property. That's an aerial photo then showing US Highway 12, North Town Hall Road, Renee Drive, Future Street. This is the site, residential uses, vacant residential, vacant commercial, existing commercial around the property. This is the general development plan for the property. Again, showing US Highway 12, North Town Hall Road, access off of North Town Hall Road. This is the Quick Trip convenience store, a truck fueling station, a truck scale, and then truck parking. And this is a landscape buffering proposed along the south property line. The application included the rezoning and this general development plan plus a conditional use permit for a truck stop. It also had a narrative that was provided by applicant and is within your packet. If this rezoning were to be approved with this general development plan, final site plans consistent with the plan would still need to go back to Plan Commission for their approval. The present zoning of the property, which is a C2P, is defined as a commercial district that is located in relative proximity to residential uses and major thoroughfares. And this property does have planned or existing residential uses to the south, and then Highway 12 to the north. The proposed rezoning to a C3P allows a broader range of uses, including truck stops by conditional use permit. The convenience store shown on the site plan is actually permitted with either zoning, but the C3P zoning is needed because of the truck parking, the truck scale, the truck fuel station north of the convenience store, which is defined as a truck stop by city code. Within the report of the findings that we provided for Plan Commission to review these rezonings. After that, we gave a summary of our response to those findings. We particularly draw Council's attention to finding number 5. The Council will need to judge the compatibility of this request, particularly with that existing and planned residential uses to the south. The development plan will bring truck traffic through the site with added noise and other impacts. The site plan does address these concerns by limiting its access to North Town Hall Road and then by providing a buffering along the south lot line. There are conditions of approval attached to the rezoning recommended by Plan Commission that prohibit access to Renee Drive or this future street, and then would also require their final review of that buffering plan with the final site plans. The conditional use permit for the truck stop has actually been approved by Plan Commission, subject to Council review of this rezoning. The general development plan has been addressed in this report with various conditions of approval at the end. An engineer's report is attached, which states the various provision of city services to the site. The Plan Commission did recommend approval of this rezoning with the following conditions. The access to this project is prohibited from Renee Drive and that future street to the south. To move the truck stop or the truck parking lot as far north as is possible from the south lot line, provide additional buffering. The Plan Commission review of that buffering, and then the Plan Commission added and to include in that area a berm or noise barrier. Applicant has actually already submitted a revised plan showing how they can actually move the truck parking further to the north and increase this area for additional berming and noise barrier. Condition 3, a 50-foot setback is established along the state right-of-way, and certain items such as this sign and part of that truck canopy will need to be moved to provide that setback. The site access will be reviewed by Plan Commission with final site plans, and it does require County Highway Department approval since this is a county highway. The signs will need to meet C3 district standards and are reviewed with permit. It was noted there are 2 signs along this roadway which may not be allowed. There's a non-conforming billboard on the property which will be reviewed with the final site plan by the Plan Commission. There's an 80-foot easement over the property for an overhead power line which we need to see a copy of to assure that these improvements are allowed underneath the power line. The design, again, of that landscape buffering will be determined by Plan Commission with final site plan. And all other aspects, as required by City Code, will be reviewed by Plan Commission with final site plan. And then finally, compliance with recommendations in the City Engineer's report, which is further on in the packet. It basically requires applicant to enter into a development agreement for the construction of this future street, that they provide calculations for stormwater runoff, that the Plan Commission allows these wider curb cuts at 40 feet because of the anticipated truck traffic into the site, that they complete a traffic impact analysis with this project and then enter into a development agreement for the funding of the traffic capacity improvements identified in such analysis. And with that, I'd certainly answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Tufti? Councilmember Von Eden.
Ms. Tufti, will these trucks, when they're parked there, be running their motors and their coolers and stuff at night, making noise for the people in the neighborhood, or how is that being accommodated?
It was stated at the hearing at Plan Commission that's likely to occur in certain instances, particularly in the wintertime with diesel engines. And that was being accommodated again by the idea of providing a noise barrier as is possible within the berm along the property line.
Were there any people from the neighborhood here that commented on that? Because obviously that can be very noisy in the evening.
There was a representative from John Mogensen's office. They actually own about 150 of the units in that neighborhood, and they spoke in support because they see this as providing groceries and other services to their neighborhood. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Tiwa.
Thank you, Council President. I too just want to re-ask, I had a constituent contact me about concern about the light pollution and about the sound. Is a sound wall going up? What type of reinforcement? And are the lights going to be flooding that neighborhood where their windows, they used to just have dark, now they will have a great light? Or what designs have they done to minimize those?
With final site plans, they will need to comply with city requirements. The city has an exterior lighting manual that requires all lighting to be shielded and that the glare be kept on the property, and that'll be reviewed by Plan Commission with the final site plans. In terms of the noise, they will be providing a landscape buffer with berm or other noise barrier for this project that again be reviewed by Plan Commission with the final site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Tufti, a couple questions. First is the neighborhood right directly to the south of, I believe it's Stonewood Drive, the road that's going to be, or the new road that's going to be completed. None of the houses have been put in, am I correct, on the southern side?
There are two duplexes here and here. The remainder of this property is vacant with multifamily zoning. There has, at this time, there's a condominium project approved, only one of the units was built. There are assisted living units down on Renee Drive to the south that have been built. It's actually shown on the, that's the assisted living. Mm-hmm. That's the condominium project. The rest of it still remains vacant.
So the neighbors that would be most impacted aren't actually there yet.
Correct. These are all vacant lots.
May I ask a follow-up question? In terms of, I believe it's fact-finding number 4, maybe it's 6, to do with environmental issues. It says in here that in the plan that's addressed, but I don't think I fully understood how that's addressed. I mean, obviously, a gas station, one of the issues you can have is spills and how that gets washed away. Is it my understanding that it sort of essentially goes into a detention pond and then that filters it out, or what happens in the case of spills from a gas station and how that impacts the...
There's containment around the pump, and then beyond that, there's filtration areas required by city ordinance. When we get to environmental areas, if there was an environmental concern such as floodplain, steep slope, those types of issues, we would have raised it in the report. We were not aware of any in our report, and I didn't see any raised with the Public Works or engineering staff report either.
Thanks.
Other questions? Mr. Tufti, do you know if the applicant assumes that all of those parking stalls will be full at night? Or what is the demand, the truck parking demand, I guess?
I would ask applicant how that works with other facilities, and I know he may have an answer for that.
Is this a new thing for the Quick Trip Corporation? Or?
I know they have one in Toma, that they've operated for many years. I know there are to the west of this other convenience stores that have truck parking and fuel stations. So they are, again, a combination convenience store, truck stop. There is also a Mack Truck, their repair garage is right across the road right here. It already exists, again, in the town. So.
A few years ago, a person who lives in the city and is a over-the-road truck driver contacted me and complained that there were not adequate off-street facilities for overnight truck parking.
And that could be true, and that might be why Quick Trip is interested in this site, given these other two facilities here and here may be full. Yeah.
He said that they find places on the streets around the city and until they're detected, and then they move to another place.
Interesting.
So maybe this is addressing a problem, but I appreciate that my fellow council members have asked questions about the impact on the neighborhood, especially as far as light and sound and all that. So.
Could I ask another one?
Thank
you, Council President. Mr. Tufte, one of the issues as well that is looked at in the fact finding is to do with compatibility with uses associated with other properties around that area, and one of those would probably be walkability and bikeability for neighbors who are in that area. And can you talk a little bit about their safety and how that's integrated into this plan, considering the uptick in truck traffic?
We would likely anticipate with this project that some type of a pedestrian bike connection be provided across the property, say in that location, so that it gets down to the residential street. Normally they'd go out to the county road. I don't know if that would be advisable in this situation, but connecting it south might be the more advisable way to do it. This is an older subdivision developed in the town that was then annexed for utilities at a later date, so there are no sidewalks within the subdivision itself.
Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. Are there other truck stops or facilities that are used as truck stops in that neighborhood?
Yes, there is a convenience store and truck stop here, convenience store and truck stop here, and then again there's a truck repair business right across the road. You can see an aerial. It's Mack Truck right there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tufte. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Or do?
Mm-hmm.
No. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
You could state I always forget to say, we do ask that you state your name and your address when you approach the podium.
Madam Chair, members of the City Council, my name is Scott Teig, and I'm Vice President with Quick Trip Corporation and have been for 25 years. So most of the new stores here, Daryl and I have done. He's got a few more years in Eau Claire than I do, but we've done a lot, and it's good to be back. Interesting thing about Quick Trip and Eau Claire is that Quick Trip, with our 550-some stores now, our first store was in Eau Claire. I don't know if any of you knew that, but it was up on Hastings Way, across from McDonald's on the end of a strip center, and I can't tell you exactly what's there now, but that was the first Quick Trip store. Thank you for hearing our request this evening. While we do service trucks here, and I'll address some of the questions that you had about truck stops, we do have what we call truck stops. This is, in my book, really not a truck stop because we don't have tire facilities and all of the stuff that truckers would have, like at the Pines out on 29 or Artoma or Mauston facilities. Our parking here is probably about the same as the two Holiday truck facilities to the west of us. How much will that be used? Since you probably were contacted about truck facilities in Eau Claire, a Love's Truck Stop has gone into Menominee on exit 45, and a Flying J has gone into Roberts in the last 5 years. And they both have parking for probably 200 trucks. And that's what truck stops really are, is where you got large, and at our Wilson facility at the Glenwood City exit 28, we have parking for 175 trucks. Those are what we call truck stops. This will service trucks, no question. But when we can't make it here without trucks, but we can't make it here without the neighborhood either. And our neighbors will be our best customers, and we'll do what we can to please our neighbors. One of the neighbors after the planning commission meeting asked if we could put a berm on the east end. And you can see that we did not ask to rezone the whole parcel. We're buying all the way to the next road to the east. But we're only rezoning what we're going to use. So the rest of it will still be C2. We designed this thing with the neighbors in mind, clearly. Our lights will all be shielded lights. We keep our lights on our property, and we will not put as much light on the property line as the street lights will put on the property line from the street lights at the property. We put the diesel to the north side, so the building will shield the diesel activity. The scale is up there by the road. That's almost a non-event, really. So we really designed this with the neighbors in mind. The first access on Town Hall Road will be a right-in, right-out. Our first request was with the city and the DOT is to bring all the trucks in and out of that one. They don't want any left turns coming in there, so there'll be a median in front of that first driveway, and all the traffic will come in the other one and go out the other one, out the north driveway. We agree with all of the conditions. We think the berm is a good idea. That was added at the planning commission meeting. We'll control our lights. Our landscaping plan will be, and between the landscaping plan and the fence and the berm, we'll keep the noise on our property. Will they be able to look out and see the lights? One nice thing about this site is it's sitting down, so I think the lights should not be too much of an issue. Maybe on the two duplexes, a little more effect there, but all the rest of it, I don't think that they'll see our lights. One last thing about Quick Trip is our convenience store magazine does a secret shop on the top 10 convenience store companies in the United States. And they are judging cleanliness, friendliness, bathrooms, overall operation of the convenience store. We have been judged the top convenience store company in the United States 5 of the last 8 years. So we're very proud of that. Just won it again. And the other 3 years we got second. I'd be here to answer any questions. And thank you. We appreciate your support.
Thank you, Mr. Teig. Councilmember Strobel has a question for you.
I do have a question. It probably doesn't have much to do with the rezoning though, but do you have natural gas pumps at this station, just out of curiosity?
We would like to, and if it was 2 years ago, we'd have probably said yes to that. However, now with the price of fuel coming down, the compressed natural gas business has almost stopped. There's a very large potential customer just not too far away there that if they ask for compressed natural gas, we'd probably try to figure out a way. At the time, it's not planned for this. We did put it on our Black Avenue store at the North Crossing 53. We have it there. So we do have it in Eau Claire.
Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. And thanks for your presentation as well this evening.
You're welcome.
One of the concerns that I wanted to raise, and you know, it's hard to say right now because if you look at the map, the neighbors who are most affected by this are quite a ways away. But as you know, there's going to be neighbors that are much closer, potentially in the coming years, 5 to 10 years. Who knows what that is? And I guess one of the things that concerns me is the fact that trucks are noisy. That there's a lot of fumes that come off of them at night if they're sitting there idling. That the potential of light, which you've talked about, hopefully that will be mitigated. But I think the concern is just how close some of these neighbors eventually could be to that area. And I appreciate some of the work that you're doing so far in trying to be the best neighbor that you can. But I'm sort of still concerned about whether the truck piece of this is really fitting into what neighbors would like to see when their houses are there.
Will there be fumes if the trucks are running? Yes, there will. 28 stalls really limits the amount of trucks. And of course, from the business end of it, we hope it's full. We're the third choice they have when they come in. They got 2 holidays they got to go by to come to us. We'll try to be better, but there won't be the fumes like there is at a real truck stop. Will there be some? Yeah, there'll probably be some, but it should be. I want to say the word insignificant. That might downplay it a little too much, but I don't think it should be too big a problem.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Teig.
Thank you.
Enjoyed your presentation. Is anyone else here to speak about this possible rezoning? This is an actionable item on our agenda tomorrow afternoon. Now, seeing none, the chair will close item 1. Turn our attention to item 2, which is a public hearing on a proposed ordinance amending Chapter 18.25 of the Code entitled Off-Street Parking and Loading. Mr. Tufte.
The comprehensive plan identifies the need for us to update the zoning code parking requirements, and in your packet is the draft amendment. The Plan Commission has been reviewing these drafts for a number of months. They've had 3 previous meetings where they've looked at the draft and other materials, and this amendment was also reviewed by City Attorney's Office, and there's various wording changes made by their office to provide proper form to the ordinance. I would note that this is an amendment to a zoning code, and thus it applies only to new development. Gotten a couple of calls today from people thinking this applies to all development. It doesn't. It only applies to new development. I would also note that we did look at other community standards and reviewed what they were doing as it pertains to parking requirements. We did find that they're all over the board. Parking requirement is a community standard, should be set by each community's individually. And probably the one community that had similar standards to us was Green Bay, but they've had similar standards to us in many other aspects of our zoning code. And you'll find a wide variety of different standards as it pertains to parking requirements looking around the country. The other thing the Plan Commission also did was to compare how these changes would have impacted past development proposals had they been in, these standards been in place in the past. We did find that for one project would have actually decreased the parking requirement, and for 4 other projects it would have slightly increased the parking requirement. So depending on the mix of uses within the project, it affected them differently. I would like to go through each of the substantive changes with council and then answer questions at the end. The first change, which I highlighted on the first page of the ordinance, basically parking for residential or office uses, which is typically an all-day or long-term parking that is proposed to be off-site from a development, may be required by Plan Commission to provide a contract to assure that parking is maintained. Under present code, residential parking is reviewed by, if it's off-site from the proposed development, is reviewed by a conditional use permit by the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission has required an agreement to be in place. This takes it a step further and says you have to have a contract in place, and also applies that provision to office uses, since that again is all-day parking typically. It does not apply it to other types of uses, which are normally uses that change over during the day. The second set of changes then are outdated provisions for mixed-use parking, downtown parking, or joint-use parking is eliminated and replaced by a general policy allowing the Plan Commission to reduce parking requirements based on a parking analysis. So here's our mixed-use or joint-use parking provisions. They are all eliminated. Here's our downtown parking requirements, actually referencing a 1985 downtown parking plan. That is eliminated. And we simply add a provision then at the bottom where the Plan Commission may reduce parking requirements based on a parking analysis provided by applicant. The Commission already was allowed to reduce parking requirements for joint use parking. The commission was already allowed to simply reduce parking requirements when it can be clearly shown by an analysis that the parking simply isn't needed. Those provisions remain in the code. The next change is bike parking requirements are allowed a 5% reduction in vehicle parking for only a central business district zoned area. That's this change here. Right now, that 5% reduction is allowed for all development. This amendment allows it now only for central business district zoning provisions. This reduction also, or this amendment also eliminates another 5% reduction in vehicle parking requirements if you doubled your bike parking on a site. Provision 4 allows the Plan Commission to grant parking requirement reductions for uses to provide for ride sharing or group transit pass programs. That's a new standard added to the code. We found other communities are starting to do that of this size within the country. Change 5 is the one that you probably hear most of the talking about this evening. Basically, it changes the parking requirement for multifamily development to a 1 stall per bedroom standard within each dwelling unit. Under our present code, we require 1 1/2 parking stalls for dwelling units with 1 or 2 bedroom, 2 parking spaces for dwelling units having 3 bedrooms, and then 1 parking space per bedroom for 4 bedrooms or larger units. The amendment simply changes that standard to a 1 space per bedroom standard. That means that the parking change will actually decrease your parking requirement for 1 bedroom units, increase the parking requirement for 2 and 3 bedroom units, and for 4 bedroom or larger units, your parking requirement remains the same. And this is what you'll hear a lot of discussion about this evening. Change 6, there are a few outdated terms within the code that we updated or added new standards. A mortuary is removed for a funeral home. We added standards for telemarketing centers or call centers, automobile repair shops, which we did not have in code. And then the final change is our design standards for laying out of a parking lot is updated. I would note this was added to city code in 1990. It was the first diagram placed in city ordinance. It was handwritten and taped into city code at that time, just so you know how old it is. That is removed, and we update it then with a new diagram showing a double row and one-way or single-row parking design standards. It actually reduces the design standards by 2 feet. The standard bay in present code is 62 and reduces it down to 60-foot bay width, which is a more common standard we found used throughout the country. We did receive a letter from the development community, which was placed in your packet, and the Plan Commission has recommended approval, and I'd certainly answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Tufte? I'll just remind us of our standard to try to keep our questions to 2 per person, and so we can get to the public hearing quickly. Might be germane for tonight. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Tufte, I noticed that some of the numbers here are not whole numbers, such as number 8, hospital 1 1/2, or dwelling units for people who are elderly or have disabilities at 0.75. I'm curious to learn, how would the calculation be enforced or calculated if it's not a whole number on its own?
We round up.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember T-Wall.
Thank you, Council President. Just wanted to clarify, you define new development versus replacement and repair. If in a case of a repair of a parking area and it was large and made a little bit larger, would that then fall under the new code, or would it never fall under the new design parameters?
Again, this is parking requirements. So if a business had a parking lot and they're simply repaving it, just go repave it. If they're repaving it and adding parking stalls, we do what's called a minor site plan review to look at drainage, landscaping, lighting. If they're changing the business in terms of the size of the business within an addition or the use within a building so that the parking requirement increases, these new standards would now come into effect, and we would review that addition or that change in use as it pertains to these parking requirements. The existing building still remains under the old standards. It's only the addition or change of use that triggers review under the new standards. If they totally demolished a building and built a new building, the whole new building is now reviewed under the new standards.
Okay, thank you. Excellent.
Councilmember Strobel?
Thank you. There's a couple things I really like in here. Back from my days on the Plan Commission, where we're going to require contracts of conditional use permits, or the ones that are required to have parking
Yes.
off-site. So is that something that's going to be reviewed annually, or is it just they would come in and give you that parking contract?
The agreements that have been put in place by Plan Commission, there are 9, of which 5 are still in place. 4 of them have gone away because the businesses have changed. So we do keep track of those agreements. A contract, I think, further formalizes the provisions between the property owner and the developer and how that property can or cannot be used. Our biggest concern is that we get an agreement on a property, and then that property owner decides he wants to develop that property. Well, what happens to then the business that was using that land for the parking? And we need to get in place the proper wording for a contract that addresses those issues, that either they can't do that or they got to go back to the Plan Commission and get a revised parking plan in place before they're allowed to change the use of the property.
And would there be follow-up on that, or is, again, initially they come in with that contract, and 2 or 3 years later, maybe they don't have that contract anymore?
We would keep track of those contracts just as we are the agreements at this time.
Okay. And on the same tack, now you can give a reduction for, if there's 100 stalls, if they provide rideshare program proof and that type. Will that be the same sort of situation where that would be reviewed and followed up on?
It should be. You will note we tied it to larger businesses. We found that other communities were doing that simply because of the concern of keeping track of these types of agreements out there. The few that have seen those types of contracts in other communities have been successful in implementing them. So we thought, well, let's see if we can have one of those work here in Eau Claire. Jamf would probably be a great example of one that might want to try one someday. You know, that type of an example. So.
Okay. Was that one question?
I'll get back to you then. Councilmember Mitchell, thank you.
So, Mr. Tufte, if we change the ordinance as it is proposed tonight, does that necessarily mean that there will be larger parking lots in a development?
It may, particularly in commercial development or greenfield development. However, in our neighborhood redevelopment that's going on, normally the developer comes in and has to meet a certain design standard, so that the amount of parking on a property can only cover so much of the property. They're required to provide a certain amount of green space and setback, all pretty much set now by Plan Commission based on past development. And what will likely happen with a parking increase on projects is that parking will remain the same. It's the project will become slightly smaller in order to meet the new standards.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Strobel?
Yeah, I guess on that same, on 18.25.030, that changing the parking to the 1 per bedroom, I guess you sort of answered that. You're thinking, the reason behind this is you think the density is going to be less. And would that be something that would be able to be approached through a rezoning versus changing the parking requirements? And then one more question on that, could they not have, the developers, could they not have parking off-site within 500 feet as well?
They can always have off-site parking approved by Plan Commission by conditional use and tied to a contract. They can always ask Plan Commission for a reduction based on a parking analysis, and we see those typically with our elderly projects in terms of they just don't need that type of parking on the site. Those are two of the things that could happen. A rezoning could be asked for. However, in most of the older neighborhoods, the zoning's fairly well set because of the neighborhood plans that are in place.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember With.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Tufti, a couple questions. The first being the provision regarding reductions that can be seen through providing bicycle parking spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of the thinking behind why that should only exist in the central business district.
The Plan Commission felt that in most instances, in residential areas, folks that had bikes and might be putting in the bike parking requirement also have cars, and there's still need for car storage. In a central business district where you want your development more intense and your parking lots not as substantial because of that intensity, they felt then allowing the reduction was appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask a follow-up? Can you speak a little bit to how these changes evolved and came from, and the discussion between both neighbors and obviously the development community, which has a stake in this as well, but sort of how this evolved and why this is coming to us right now?
There has been for almost 2 years discussion at the Plan Commission as they reviewed development projects about the need for the city to look at its parking requirements, particularly how it was impacting our older neighborhoods. Are we providing enough parking? Are these reductions that we're allowing for transit too much, and therefore we're not getting enough parking? Is there too much parking occurring on streets within these older neighborhoods? When the comprehensive plan was updated in 2015, a task was actually placed in the comprehensive plan by the Plan Commission to study that in 2016. So at the beginning of this year, the Plan Commission began a series of meetings, actually had 4 meetings over this year, where they reviewed what other communities were doing. They reviewed how the various changes might impact development had it been reviewed under these new changes. They received input from the neighborhood groups, from the development community, and they chose to make the changes that are before the council this evening. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tufti. I guess that's the most helpful document to leave up there?
Yep.
Well, okay. Now would be the time that we can take public input, and you can just approach the podium, state your name and your address, and make your point. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mrs. President Kincaid. My wife and I own a home in the 3rd Ward, and I'd just like to speak to you all. But
would you mind stating your name, sir?
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, my name is Tom Olson.
Okay.
And my wife's name is Judy.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. And we just got a ad in mail that for $1 you can get the paper for a month. So we sent the dollar bill in and we're getting the paper. So I read in the paper just yesterday, I think it was, that there's a 1.5 parking space. And I think it was Catherine Emanuel asked, how do you see if I can find this here. How do you compute when something is like not a, let's see if I can find this, how do you compute it, when it's in not a, just like a one number, like 1 or 2 or 3? How do you compute it? Wasn't that your answer, your question? How do you compute that? And the gentleman that was before me said, you round it off. And my question is, how do you round off 1.5? I mean, how do you round that off? And to whose favor do you round it off?
I think Mr. Tufti can maybe help you quickly with, we could just have a little math lesson.
Okay.
Are you prepared, Mr. Tufti? with an
We-
example?
We rounded up,
Up.
not off, up.
That's kind of what I thought. I kind of thought
So-
that,
If there's a, okay, Daryl, don't leave yet. If there's a 20-bed unit,
Which has a parking requirement, well, that'd have a parking requirement of 30 stalls, which is 21 bedroom, it'd have a parking requirement of 31 and a half, we'd round it up to 32.
does that help?
well, it just seems like it's in his favor. I mean, and my wife and I are trying to give people, a low price rent. We opened our home to nice places for people to live. We keep it clean. We keep up the fire specs and everything else. And so we, in fact, one renter, he and his wife were there for about 2 years, and I noticed his windshield wipers were kind of deteriorated. So I went to a auto shop and bought him a pair of windshield wipers and told him to go up there and pick them up. It's hard for everybody nowadays, but it just seems like, that's why I asked that question. In whose favor do you find that? How do you whose favor do you find that in? And it just seems like, for a small business like we have, just a little, 3 or 4, apartment complex, that it's getting harder and harder to make it there, So that's all I really wanted to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We might have some input for you if you just wait
Okay,
a
sure.
minute. Councilmember
Okay,
Mitchell?
sure.
So, Mr. Olson, are you planning on building any new apartment buildings or new?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Then in that case, this is not going to affect you because this is only going to apply to new building. So you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is John Mogensen, 301 Water Street. I'm opposed to the change. I think what we've had for years, it's worked fine. Let's see here, where we go here. This is one of the items that was handed out to the Plan Commission when they made their decision on voting for this change. And I think the city should do some more research into actually if there's a need to change the parking. And also, they should study the units that are built. For an example, the building that we're building on Water Street right now would not get built because they're 44 spaces short. And then they go into discuss the Confluence project. They got, says right here, and this is what was given to the Plan Commission, this says 119 units with 287 beds. But right in the newspaper here, there's actually 410 students living in this building. So they didn't consider the number of people living there. And so the Confluence or mixed-use building would have been 59 spaces short based on 287 bedrooms. But if you base it on 410 students, what are they, 200 spaces short? So that would never got built. So I think what they need to do is a study based on actual number of students and how many cars they have. Last year we rented to over 800 students and we had 61% that had cars. So at that, at that rate, this is all wrong. I think that they need to do a study on actual students and number of people that have cars, which has not been done. Nobody called me about when they were doing this research on how many people I rented to, how many students, how many cars. So I think before it gets approved, I think it needs to go back and have some research done in other communities. Like Madison doesn't have this regulation. So I guess that's my opinion. Any questions?
Might be a question by Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. Mr. Mogensen, how do you know if a person you're renting to has a car or doesn't have a car?
When they come in when they rent from us, if they live in one of our properties, they have to have if they have a car, they fill out an application and they get a parking pass that puts on their car. I'm sure, and so we go around to the area, and if there's a car parked in one of our parking lots that doesn't have a pass, we put a ticket on it. So they want to get a pass because otherwise they'll get a ticket.
Yeah, but if they buy a car then and don't use your parking, but park it on the street, you really have no way of knowing that, do you?
No. But if you go down on Chippewa Street, and a lot of the people here are from the Randall Park area, and they're opposed to, if you go down Chippewa Street, and about 8, 9, 10 o'clock, the street will all fill up. But those are cars that are coming to students that live out of the neighborhood. So if you go down there at midnight, the street is empty. So I think there's some other options, and I don't think the city staff studied those enough. And I would just say that I hope this is postponed for a while till we can actually do a study as to how many people do have cars. Because a lot of people who live close to the campus don't have cars. Their life is changing. And if you require one for every bedroom, you're going to, I think this is an attempt to limit density more than anything. Or we're going to have a lot more bigger parking lots that we don't need, that aren't full.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mogensen. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Helene Smyer. I live at 320 Broadway Street in historic Randall Park neighborhood. I'm president of the Neighborhood Association, and I'm here to speak on their behalf. It is well documented in our neighborhood plan that we have parking congestion in our neighborhood. And the study was done probably a year and a half ago. A survey was sent out indicating, and the results indicated strong concerns about the difficulty in the congested streets near their homes due to the heavy on-street parking demand. You can find this on page 24, on page 28, on page 34. There are more references to congested parking. It is an issue, and this is before new development began. Now, you probably are aware of this, but for every new development site that has occurred, and we have 3 of them so far, the population density has increased, has doubled, and in one case it has almost tripled. Well, that's kind of unsustainable for any neighborhood at this point. And Mr. Mogensen is probably right. What we are looking at with help from this ordinance is to control the density a bit until we can get some kind of a better plan or a comprehensive development plan for the neighborhood. But I would like to refer to our zoning map. What is frightening, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, does this work? It's like, that way, it's fine. Oh, thank you. Thanks. What is frightening is that nearly half of our neighborhood in that gray area is zone RM, which is mixed-use residential. And this is where all the development is taking place because you can build bigger places with more density. But if you look at that, that's a lot of the neighborhood that could potentially have these bigger, doubled populations where at one point, and I'll just point out the worst case scenario is the 200 block of Chippewa Street, where there were formerly perhaps 18 to 20 people, there are now 48 people living, and there are 36 spots in the back. Now, we did agree to that, so in hindsight, may have been a mistake, but it's done. But we really didn't know more were coming, so now we move up to the next block, and there are more, and there will be more. And so we look at that and we think, we need help. And this to us is one of the most practical, objective ways to just control a bit of the numbers before people just move out and give up, because some are at that point. Now, I just want to show you another map, if you will allow me to, which those are just my notes. Don't read those, just look at the map. It doesn't say anything bad about you, it just, there. Thank you. They're just notes to myself. This is what I call our Mardi Gras map. It isn't like the interior of the neighborhood is pristine single-family homes. It is not. We have single-family duplexes, orange, brown is multifamily, gray is rooming house, and red, of course, is commercial. We're already a lot of cars. So I just wanted you to see that. So it is a concern to us. Now I have to reorganize. Also, I suspect that everyone in this room has been to our neighborhood at one time or another. They come to shop, they come to dine, they come to use the trails, they come to church, they come to the parks all summer long. If you look at that gray area again, all the way up to the orange area is parked with cars coming to the music events in the park. 4th of July, the whole neighborhood is parked in. That little Doll and Pet Parade. They're parked up 3 blocks, and parents are scrambling to get their little kids 3 blocks down and into the parade on time. It's a busy neighborhood. I think we owe it to the city residents to keep some parking clear. Shouldn't all be parked in by residents. It's a city neighborhood. It is used by the city. Okay, and then I think I'm coming to the end, so don't despair. It also seems to me that a parking ordinance is easier to change than dealing with congested parking. And I use, for an example, our hospital area right now. Currently, we have been working diligently with the city for over a year and a half. And the complaints have been there for about 10 years. But we've been working seriously since our plan is done for over a year and a half. We can't get a solution. The parking ordinance, okay, I think I heard Mr. Tufte say a few months they worked on it. So if you adopt this and you find out it's a mistake, it's easier to change than not adopting it. And then suddenly we have this parking congestion that for 10 years we won't be able to do anything about. So clearly we are in favor of this ordinance. Clearly we urge you to follow the Plan Commission's lead and adopt this. And in closing, I just want to say one more thing. Our neighborhood is not opposed to new development. We just think that we work together with them. I'll still talk to John Mogensen. We'll still talk to Brian Johnson. We will talk. We will work together. But right now, this would be very helpful for us to know that there was a little objective piece of legislation out there. Because what we're finding in our plans is that the language is pretty soft. And we're constantly wondering, well, what does compatible really mean? And what is context sensitive? And they're open to interpretation. This would not be open to interpretation. It would be kind of black and white and could be helpful. And I know that the suggestion will be to do a study. Great, it's in our plan. Maybe a study should be done, but then fair is fair. While you do the study, I think that all proposals should be put on hold. Otherwise, it looks like we know how long studies take. They're not quick and easy. So
thank you, Ms. Meyer.
I think I said everything I said, and I thank you very much.
And the chair allowed you extra time because I know you're speaking for many people.
So, I wasn't looking at the lights. Fine. I'm sorry.
You know that you represent many people, so
okay.
You need a little
well, I welcome your questions if anything wasn't clear. And if you notice frustration in my voice, I do represent many people who are much more frustrated than I, because I live in a great part of the neighborhood. And I don't really have parking congestion problems.
I do see a question for you from Councilmember Strobel. Right.
Thank you. Hi, Ms. Meyer. You mentioned a lot about frustrations with the neighborhood and parking congestion. And, you know, you did a survey with the neighborhood and that was a big issue. You also mentioned the Mayo employee parking. And I know Mr. Mogensen mentioned a lot of the people parking that maybe we're gonna park in your neighborhood and walk to school or walk someplace else. This ordinance sort of affects new development. Is that really the issue, or is it these other outside forces that are parking there that are causing the parking congestion, and how will this help that?
Well, okay, the 200 block of Chippewa, I kind of threw in the hospital area just because it's frustrating. That doesn't really apply. Only new development applies. But if on Chippewa Street, if you have 12 cars parked on that street, you only get about 18 on one side. Those 12 cars will displace 12 commuter cars, and they're going to come into the neighborhood. So it is new development if it's too large. If this ordinance were in place a year and a half ago, we wouldn't have about 22 cars on the street that we will now possibly have. And I know that John thinks not everybody has a car. I beg to differ. People with experience have seen most people with cars. But does that answer your question? But it displaces, if the development is so large that it displaces, it has that many cars on the street, then the commuter cars can't get in. There's no place. Then they keep moving closer inside. I mean, if you really studied it, and I have studied it, I've watched them. They're closer now to the Randall Park area than ever. All the artery streets, 2nd, 3rd, they're busy. They're crowded. Chippewa, Niagara, Hudson, all the way up. They're all crowded daily. But, so, I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, thank you.
Good enough?
A follow-up to that? You put the zoning map out there. Didn't the neighborhood just do a new neighborhood plan? Did you look at rezoning those areas?
No, we didn't.
You didn't, okay.
And we kind of think that was a mistake, if you really want to know the truth.
Okay.
But we honestly didn't see this coming. We didn't realize, we did not interpret RM zoning as meaning student housing. We thought that would mean maybe a few more duplexes could go up, or we just didn't see this coming.
Thank you.
Councilmember Worthman has a question.
Thank you, Council President Kincaid. Ms. Meyer,
Yes.
just a couple questions. I know we've talked a lot on the phone as well, and I appreciate all the time you put in this, and your breadth of knowledge on this is incredible. So, but the first thing, and just to give you a little bit of a feeling, you know, my general sense is that density is better, and you know, how do we do that in a smart way? But you know, that's something that we've talked about on City Council for many years. Is infill, is density, and increasing density, and for numerous reasons. But some of those have to do with environmental, some of them are social, and how do we get to that place? So that's just something that is definitely on the front of our mind. I think another thing is the fact that we have so much parking in our community, and how do we look at potentially incentivizing where this can go besides parking and more surface parking. And I bring up that because one of the things in here is the reduction in the bicycle parking incentive that was in here. And is that something that you were in favor of, and that you think is a good idea that helps us move in the right direction?
The reduction, the non-allowance for bicycle?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Because now let me see if I get this straight. That would simply mean that they would not get that extra allowance for parking if they had bicycle racks. I'm in favor of it because students have cars and bikes. It doesn't really solve the problem of parking on the street at all, if that's what you're referring to. And when you refer to density, if I may, our neighborhood is probably at this point the most dense in the city. I'm not sure. But all the density, if it comes to our neighborhood, and if that's what's agreed upon by the city at large, then we still need help to consider what's the quality of life for the rest of the neighborhood? And how are we going to entice people to live there if they can't have a graduation party on a Sunday without having their grandparents park 2 blocks away? People aren't going to, they're not going to want to live here, and we want folks to come back here. We want that balance. There has to be a balance between the density allowed by development and what those who own houses live with. It's out there, Andrew. I don't know the answers. I mean, I wish I did, but for right now, this seems to me like it's a good finger in the dike kind of thing. Like, go ahead, back up, stop with development, take a good look at parking, take a good look at where you want that density, improve our plan. We welcome you to improve our plan. We're not perfect. I mean, I don't know.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer.
All right.
We appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
I'm Richard L. Chappell, 802 Ray Street, Lake Mills, Wisconsin. However, I'm here to represent my mother, 922 Fifth Avenue, Eau Claire. Our problem is we are being overrun by the hospital parking and the students, and they are parking so close to the crosswalks and our driveways and stuff that we cannot get in and out of there safely. And all we're asking is get some yellow paint to enforce what the parking rules are already in the neighborhood, and that might alleviate a little bit of this problem. But that's all I have.
Thank you so much. We're aware of that problem, particularly in the hospital area, and are actively pursuing a solution.
Okay. We've been in that house since 1904.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We're not moving faster.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Huggins, and I've got a slightly different address. It would be 16 North Carroll Street, Madison, Wisconsin. I am a principal at Urban Assets, and we have been retained by JCAP Realty to facilitate the sort of ongoing development of their properties, and so have been engaged in this process. Brian asked me to take a look at this as a planner. And I have to say that as a planner, the first place I went when I came to get to know Eau Claire was your plans. You have excellent plans. You are a very forward-thinking community. Your comprehensive plan, you are. There are some good things in there. There are some really good things in there. But I was very concerned when I heard about this 1-to-1 parking ratio because it really is going backwards. If you look at best practices, if you look at it from the standpoint of sustainability, of promoting multimodal transportation, other cities are going the exact opposite direction. And so we did a little of our own. I don't even know where I'm supposed to put this. Thank you. Oh, right there. Well, that's easy. So we did a slightly different study from what city staff did, and we really looked at other university towns. So any university towns that are of similar size. And so I'm gonna have to do this because I can't see that well. So we can looked at Oshkosh, at La Crosse, at Appleton, at Wausau, and really, while I agree with Mr. Tufte that it is all over the board, the one thing that is clear is that what they do is they look at it by a unit type, not by bedroom type. And I feel that, I think it is important that you look at university towns who are struggling with the same issues that Eau Claire is, with students coming with cars, some coming without cars. So I would strongly urge the council to consider taking another look at some of that work. In addition, looking at the letter that was written by up to 8 developers asking that this ordinance be rethought. I think if you look at your 2015 comprehensive plan update, objective number 9 under the transportation system plan states that The city should require only the amount of parking necessary to avoid problems and maintain vehicle businesses, viable businesses considering transit and on-street spaces. And then within that objective, the neighborhood parking policy, on-street parking in residential and near employment centers, commercial sites, and colleges should strike a balance between providing resident parking and providing overflow commercial and employee parking. And then this is our emphasis, requiring off-street parking may result in less attractive and less pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods. The two neighborhoods that are directly affected close to the university are the best neighborhoods in Eau Claire from the standpoint of pedestrian-friendly, walkable, close to the university, close to hospitals. And so really thinking about who those folks are parking on the street, you need to understand who they are before you can change an ordinance, I think. Lots of anecdotal evidence on both sides of the table saying, well, we think it's the commuters, well, we think it's the students. A parking study will not take very long, and they're not very expensive. And I think what the development community would really like to see is for the city to take a step back, get a third party to see who is actually parking on the streets. And then there are many, many ways to manage parking issues. Now, obviously, the neighborhood is trying to use this as a way to manage density, which I do not think is good policy. That should be approached through zoning. But if the problem is really parking, then let's look to solutions to manage the parking. Again, you've got a wonderful community, some great neighborhoods close to the university. I know that Helena and I have had discussions about the historic Randall neighborhood plan. I would actually say that the plan and the zoning is exactly what is needed to help that neighborhood become even stronger, to pull some of the students out of the neighborhood, out of the core of the neighborhood, to the surrounding areas in the gray areas, which will then free up some of those houses in the interior. And with that, any questions?
Questions for Ms. Huggins? I see none. If you'd like to leave the chart with Ms. Merle, she would get us copies for tomorrow.
Great, thank you.
Hello, Jeremy Gregert, 451 Lincoln Avenue in the 3rd Ward. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion about the parking requirements. I do think it's a very important subject. I was kind of expecting, based on our comprehensive plan and our sustainability plan and some of the other, the general movement going on in this country, that we would actually be having a discussion about reducing on off-street automobile parking requirements. So this is a relatively disappointing proposal in my mind. Kind of goes along the lines with some of the concern from the previous speaker as well. Certainly, I don't know that many of you have a parking lot in your backyard. I do. And it's not because I have a car. It's because of policies like this. And it's kind of, for someone who's really into sustainability and someone who tries to bike and walk and take transit everywhere to really reduce some of the issues we have with transportation really becoming the #1 sector for greenhouse gas emissions in this country. For someone who's trying to reduce impervious surfaces, I legally have to have a paved parking space in my backyard because I live in a rooming house, which requires a parking space for every room. And now this would be the case for thousands of other people in our community, and that's essentially the result of a policy that is meant to solve an issue in one neighborhood. And certainly there are some big issues in the Randall Park neighborhood, there's no doubt, and there's some of those are mimicked in the 3rd Ward and some other neighborhoods. But I think we should be smarter about this, more targeted, more doing things like parking studies, maybe bringing this back to some of our commissions that have some expertise in this regard in terms of sustainable development. So we have an advisory commission on sustainability that could take a look at this and give some perspective on the types of policies that would not be so harmful to our environment and to the economic viability of our development community and to the prices of our rental property. For people that really don't have a ton of money to spend, for someone who can't afford a car, can they really afford a paved parking space in the backyard that they can't even put something in? I know container gardening is becoming a bigger thing. So I would like to try to do that with the space in my backyard. But yeah, it's kind of disappointing. I don't know what else to tell you. I do think that, obviously these things can be changed and we can see what happens. But I think there's probably a way to study this and really look at the neighborhoods that are using this to reduce density. You're using an aspect of the zoning code which was not necessarily intended to be used in such a way to carry out other objectives. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with this. So essentially one of the more concrete things that you could do is actually refer this to the Advisory Commission on Sustainability and open up a broader conversation about the implications. And have more perspectives to be able to hash it out. And we really don't have a parking committee for the city necessarily. So it sort of falls on you to decide whether you want to do a parking study and look at really actually looking into the facts on this, because frankly I'm not hearing many today. So thank you.
Mr. Greger. Councilmember Strobel has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Greger. What do you think about the developers losing the incentive to have bike rack parking? Even a little bit downtown, 5%, and then probably potentially up to 10% for the other developers. And I remember when I was in the Plan Commission, when I believe you brought forth the bike rack ordinance, there was quite a conversation about this.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of falls under the whole grab bag nature of this proposal. I do think we should look at our zoning code comprehensively and look at different things we could do. That would not have been one I would have chosen to do. I think that I do think that when we passed a bike parking requirement, we were able to, we didn't really need the incentive aspect as much anymore because we just made it a requirement. But I think that additional 5%, up to an additional 5% for increasing the amount of bike parking could really come in handy as an incentive. So that at the very least should be included. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of another example where I'm a bit surprised at the city actually going back on some of its sustainability and alternative transportation objectives that have been carried forward for the last 7 years.
Thank you, Mr. Greger. I see another question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Greger, there was a few references before from speakers about the number of students who come to university without a car versus those who come with both. I think there's some difference of opinion.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I came to Iowa State without a car, and then I think I might have not had one for 1 year at Eau Claire, but got one later. But what is your impression of that? And maybe the thinking here is that the contract should cover whether or not some of the people that are going to be living in that development are going to be just coming with a bicycle, not both. I mean, what do you know about what percentages of students probably don't have cars?
Well, I definitely, just because I'm me, I guess a lot of students are coming to me trying to get a bike. They're not trying to get a car because they probably know I can't help them very well. So I know a lot of students come without a car or a bike, for that matter. But yeah, there really hasn't been a study about it. I'm not going to claim to know, but I do tend to believe the more hard data that we have from Mr. Mogensen that there's 61% of the residents that are students renting from him. I don't know if he knows they're all students, but 61% do have cars. in his case. And I think it's an issue of us not knowing a lot of information before we're making decisions, and yeah, I can't really speak to the numbers.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. I see no other questions. Anyone else wish to speak tonight on this issue?
My name's Marsha Brandner, and I live at 629 Menominee Street in historic Randall Park, and I'm your crier. And I try not to cry, but it just happened. I've been sitting back there feeling really frustrated and very angry. I appreciate all the talk about sustainability. I was recycling in '79 before it was required. It took 20 years or so for the city to require it. I believe there are people out there who talk about sustainability and they would really like to have a bicycle and not a car, even recycling. If you read the newspaper or you listen to the news, a lot of recyclers aren't even recycling anymore because the price of oil has gone down. They don't know where to sell their recyclables. So I appreciate sustainability, but it may take Joe Public another 20 years to reach where some of the people feel about sustainability. I think having a study on parking would be really lovely, and considering all the developers who want it, I say fine, but then let's put a moratorium on development until the study is done. Would they agree to that? Yes, we're trying to reduce density and hoping that having this ordinance would help, because rechanging our zoning would take a whole lot longer. As Helene said, once the big buildings are there, we can't go back. But if we could get this in, we can always change it. It's much easier to change this ordinance, and then the developers can rebuild and get bigger. There's planning for First Avenue, and we've been told that, you know, there's going to be 2, 3, and 4 bedroom townhouses. And, oh, it's going to be mixed use, and anyone can live there, and, you know, the bedrooms will just be $645 a piece. I'm sorry, I don't know who they think can afford that other than a student. We would like to see more mixed housing, as in not just students. I work at Menards. That's one of the top 3 employers in this town. The wage I get would not be able to afford that. And I've been there 16 years, so I get top pay. I was talking to my sister who lives in an older neighborhood of town, and she was talking to her nephew who used to live in Eau Claire. He said, what are they talking about? Building and all that. They need jobs. We do need jobs. We need jobs that'll pay more money for people who can afford a $645 bedroom. I, too, believe a lot of students have cars and bicycles, and they may not drive their car to school because they have their bicycle or they walk. I mean, a lot of where I live, a lot of them are using the bike trail, but they have a car to go home, or they have a car to go to work to pay for that $645 bedroom. Or maybe they get the money from their parents, and they probably get a lot of other things from their parents, so they need the car to go home to make their parents happy. So, yeah, do a parking study, but then put the building on moratorium for a while. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. Ms. Merle, would you mind moving the mic back?
Hi. David Mortimer, 304 6th Avenue in Eau Claire. I'm an at-large member of the Randall Park Neighborhood Association, County Board Supervisor of 16th District, which is all in Eau Claire, up and down the Water Street area from Owen Park. I've been up and down Chippewa and the other streets, and I wanted to speak tonight in favor and support the Planning Commission's approval of this proposed change in parking, just because I think it's very important, very significant for our historic neighborhoods, our older neighborhoods that have a lot more density over the years. And I've been in my neighborhood for 12 years now. I just think that this parking proposal has overall a positive impact on our older neighborhoods, which I think are a little bit more fragile and that we need to think a little bit more about. Just to give you an idea of what we want to avoid as a community, I'll tell you about where I moved from, another university town in the inner city of Chicago. And I lived in a one flat with neighbors, 2 flats up and down the street, back and forth. There was no parking on the street whatsoever. And when snowplows came by, we would dig out our car, and other neighbors would sometimes put chairs, folding chairs or something in the area that they dug out so they could try to get the same parking spot when they would get back, because there was no parking. And you did all that work, perhaps 45 minutes, digging out your car. And you'd hope to be able to get that when you got back from work or got back from school. The kind of situation that we want to avoid is the kind of dense parking like you see in Madison, another university town, and why I have a lot of respect for urban assets and the design that they do in cities that are much more dense than Eau Claire. Last time I was at Madison and tried to find a parking spot in multiple different neighborhoods, whatever that town is doing is not working out very well. And I don't think it would work here. I wanted to also question Mr. Boguson's estimate of about 61% of students that have cars. In my area, I live on the corner of Chippewa and 6th Avenue, 1 block from Water Street. 12 years, about 210 students that I've known in the 12 years. Across the street, across the alley, next door, I'm surrounded by rentals. About 210 students. And of those in the 12 years, I would say 85 to 95% of those students had cars and have cars currently. And I expect when they come back in, it's gonna be about that same percent. It's a very high percent. A lot of the students have bikes also, but they have cars to be able to get back home, sometimes to be able to get to work. So it's a very high percentage. We have a lot of music festivals happening. Country Fest happens. My street up and down Chippewa fills up because a lot of the folks that go to Country Fest park in the area. They kind of get shuttled out to Country Fest, and they come back to have fun in the evening on Water Street. There's a lot of parking that takes place. Owen Park Blues Fest Tuesday night goes into the residential neighborhood. Lots of parking from that event too. The Eau Claire Festival, again, a lot of parking in the Water Street area. And then stores in the retail area of Water Street have a lot of customers that come in need to park in the residential area. Sometimes they have to go more than a block, sometimes 2 blocks before they find a place, because student rentals have filled up the street up and down, and that does create a problem for a lot of stores on Water Street. These are just different ideas that I think the proposed parking that changes would be really good, not only for my neighborhood, but a lot of other historic neighborhoods or older neighborhoods too, and will head off problems that come down the road to prevent us from ever becoming like a Chicago University town or a Madison University town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see no questions for you. Thank you for your testimony. Comments?
Hello, Alex Paternos, JCAP Construction. I'm the project manager. So with the new red and blue buildings, the 4plexes on the 200 block of Chippewa Street, I was in charge of actually getting those built. So that means I was there for the past 6 months, 10 times a week, if not more. And I know since we've got occupancy permits, we're at 100% occupancy, and I still have to go there because, you know, you have the hiccups of construction, some stuff is faulty, and you need to come back there and get your vendor, your contractor out there to fix it. And even as of last week, I was out there and less than half of the parking spots were full, and we're getting close to school starting here. So I think that goes to show that, you know, these people on the street, these are kids coming from other parts of the neighborhood to get close to the footbridge so they can walk to school. And you know, I don't think there's any other way that would be, you know, filled up so much. Because there's no reason that our students would choose not to park in their parking lot. They're paying for it.
Oh.
Questions?
Okay. Councilmember Van Hayden has a question.
How many parking spaces do you have per bed
We have
or bedroom?
20, I think we have 1.5 spots per 2 bedrooms there.
Okay, so you're less than the one requirement that's in there right now.
Yes. And it seems there's no problem at all. There's less than half that are filled.
Thank you.
I see no other question.
Thank you.
Mhm.
David Barnes, 420 4th Avenue. And as a frequent driver on Chippewa Street, when the Water Street Bridge is open, and it has not been in the last 6 months, but before that, Chippewa Street was parked full from 1st to 3rd Avenue and up between 3rd and 4th Avenue every day. So I drove that often from 4th Avenue to 1st Avenue. I also, while I'm here, would refute some of the assertions in the letter that was quoted in the paper that safety would be enhanced because with on-street parking. And indeed, I do drive slower, but not everyone who's driving Chippewa Street does. They're driving to get to that last parking spot before 3rd Avenue. And also, the on-street parking gives more opportunities for students who are taking their shortest path to the university to dart out from between automobiles there. So those 2 points. That's it. Yes.
Councilmember Van Hayden has a question.
Based on your experience in there, the question that was just brought up, I know it's difficult to assess this, but are most of the people parking on the streets, in your estimate, living in the apartments there, or are they the people coming in from outside of the area going to the university?
I think it's probably a bit more coming in, but now with the new developments on Chippewa Street, which did not have quite enough parking spots per bedroom, I think it will be interesting once the Water Street Bridge opens up and school starts to see how far the parking pushes back into the neighborhood.
Do you have any anecdotal information as to how many students have cars or don't have cars?
Well, in the apartments around our house, I know the house next door to us, there are 4 students that live there, and there have been 4 cars there every year for the last, I think it's been 5 years. There's a duplex down the alley from us where 6 students live, and there are 6 cars in the back. there. That's pretty much what I know for sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Comment?
My name is Amy Underwood. I live at 521 Congress Street. I've lived there for 20 years, and pretty much rentals around me. We have the bus. The bus used to come right past our house. Now it's on Fifth Avenue. Very seldom do I see people out there waiting for the bus. When I go to work on the corner of 6th Avenue and it might be 7th, in Water Street, I see a lot of students for going to the university, but I also see a lot of bikes, and right next to me is a rental, and every year for 20 years, I think there's been 4 owners. There usually are 4 residents, 4 cars, and they're using them. They have bikes, but to get to work or get to school, I see them leaving in the morning and in the afternoon. I think the housing issue for the university is playing into our neighborhood, but I see a lot of these duplexes, and I know that there's, on I think it's 7th Avenue, is it JCAP has bought like 4 houses. I see all of that traffic building up by Lakeshore. I have a hard time backing out of my driveway every morning because there's cars parked on both sides of the street. In fact, when you back out, you have to be extremely careful not to hit somebody's car. I know that the Chapels live at the corner, and people park in front of their driveway. Luther traffic probably, but in the evening, say from about 6:30, the street is empty, but otherwise it's full, car to car. And I ask about the bike parking. You know, we talk about bike wrecks, etc. What do they do in the winter? It's 20 below. Are they riding their bikes? Is that going to help anything? So I just question, you know, it's great if people are riding their bikes, but I don't see them riding when we have 2 feet of snow. So I'm just asking, you know, some of those are great alternatives, but in our climate, that makes it pretty difficult.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. I see no questions, but thank you.
Brian Johnson. I oppose the parking change. The only thing I would say is I would strongly urge you to get a parking study done prior to making any changes. It's really the only concern I have, and I really think that needs to be done. Any questions?
Okay. I see none, but thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other comments for the City Council? Anyone? So we thank you all for your comments. We do have an action item on our agenda tomorrow evening, which can take a variety of avenues. We debate well and respectfully amongst each other and have a good discussion, and we would welcome you all to tune in at 4 o'clock if you want to watch us work. And thank you again for your comments tonight. The chair then will close item 2 and bring our attention to the 3rd item on our agenda, which is a public hearing on proposed sidewalk improvements on Declaration Drive. Mr. Fieber, I guess.
Good evening. Before you tomorrow, you have a resolution authorizing the replacement of sidewalk on Declaration Drive on the east side and on the south side. And the resolution occurs assessing the property owners for the cost of these repairs. This is the North Crossing right down here, LaSalle Street right up here, Princeton Valley Golf Course up in this area. The east side of Declaration has a severe groundwater problem, which has caused the heaving of numerous sidewalks. This is a relatively This is a relatively new development. This is not unusual to see the entire length of the street with sunken sidewalks and raised sidewalks. It's not necessarily from these trees. This you can tell. They tell that there is a severe water problem. This is not atypical to all the problems that property owners have, not only with the sidewalk but with their driveways also. The proposal, the resolution involves a replacement of all the sidewalk here and the installation of drain tile on the back side of the sidewalk in this area, and then the draining of that groundwater to the stormwater system, and then the replacement of all the sidewalk, the entire length of the street. Because some of the sidewalk is in decent condition. You find a couple squares right here that are not in bad condition, but it's some other peripheral areas that have settled. What the engineering division is proposing is that the entire sidewalk be replaced because we need to put in the drain tile, but that we would credit back to the property owners, would give them a credit for every square on their property that was not cracked or moved. So the idea is we would be very generous on giving the credit back. The property owners have all received notices of the assessment, and it's all made at the worst case scenario, assuming that they were going to get no credits for any of their sidewalk squares that were being replaced. So that's in a nutshell the project. Again, we feel that the stormwater, the drainage of the groundwater into the stormwater is a viable attempt to solve part of this problem with groundwater in the street. Any questions for myself?
Councilmember Von Eden.
When were these sidewalks initially installed or built?
These are the original sidewalks that went in, and I'm guessing that development was about 25 years ago.
Okay, so it is.
So it's well before what should be the length of the useful life of a sidewalk.
So the useful life has expired on them, so the assessment.
No, the useful life should have been 40 to 50 years.
Okay. Is there any credit proposed on that because it's over the 25 years?
Well, the credit would be for the squares that are still in good shape.
Okay.
Councilmember Strobel.
On that same tack, don't we typically only assess them a percent based on the useful life? I know we do that on curb and gutter and some of those other repairs we do. So if the life of the sidewalk's 50 years and it's only lasted 25, wouldn't we special assess for that section then only 50% of the normal amount? Isn't that what we normally do?
And I'm not aware of that. I'm not aware of exactly what's in that policy. We can find that out and get it to you tomorrow.
Okay. On curb and gutter, I know we've talked about that before. And I had one follow-up question. I've been sitting here for a few years. I've never seen us put in drain tile by sidewalks before. Have we ever done that before?
I don't think we have a problem like we have in this neighborhood. There's a tremendous amount of groundwater. It's unique. It's a unique situation. It's on the side of a hill, so there's a tremendous amount of drainage. This is the hilly area is up here, and everything is draining this way, and then south to the Eau Claire River. So there's obviously some springs, some kind of groundwater action going on.
Councilmember T-Wall.
Thank you, Council President. Just related to that, just kind of wondering the causal agents of this. That area is greatly developed over the past recent years.
Mm-hmm.
And is it really the projects that are beyond them, up on the hill and to the side, that are rushing far more amount of water than used to be in? Was our sewer system designed to handle that water coming from the north and the east as that terrain? So while it's good to put in the drain tile, I'm just wondering if we actually know the causal agent. Is there some other engineering that we may have to consider as a city to solve this?
Well, that's a possibility. I think this drain tile is a short-term attempt to see if that solves the problem. But anytime you construct anything that stops that flow of water, it's going to find a new route, and it's obviously being stopped by the sidewalk, but it's also being stopped by homes that are built, and the flow is being impeded by other structures.
Mm-hmm.
So we may find that this actually solves the problem, or makes a significant impact on the problem.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Feber. Did people come to speak to this project? Mm-hmm.
You're only gonna give me 5 minutes, and I swear every time I have to come here, you always put whatever I come here for on the last part of the agenda. Thank you very much. My name is Jim Ryman.
And your name, sir? What is
I'm
your
Jim
name?
Ryman. I live at
And your address?
2021
Thank you.
Declaration Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Ryman.
The pictures he showed you, by the way, were really the nice part of the sidewalk. I guess a couple questions that I have there is two things. I don't oppose doing something, as long as it's done properly. I've lived there since 1986, so I was there at kind of the beginning of that development in that area. There was a water problem when we moved in. Young couple, didn't pay close enough attention. It does have a sump pump. We were able to keep up with it pretty well, especially as houses were built on LaSalle, or off of LaSalle and onto Declaration and below on Stotts. There was no development immediately behind us because that was the corridor for the other side of Princeton Valley Golf Course. We know where that went. So as houses were built, the drainage got better. Our house was able, and our septic was able to keep up with it. However, since the new development behind us, which is I'm not sure what the development is, a berm was built and houses were built on top of it. And the thing was, with the water drainage issues that were there, they put a big sponge on top of a layer of clay where water is coming our way. We have spent in the last year approximately $4,000 to $5,000 on putting in a French drain around our house. And I think that is probably what caused some of the attention, because now the street is never dry, because the drain comes out at the curb and keeps the street completely wet in the curb to the drain tile, or to the south storm drain, and has run across in front of our driveway continuously, and I mean continuously, irregardless of rain, snow, ice, continuously. And I really noticed that my wife beats me home, so she gets to do the lawn a lot before I do, because she wants to stay busy. But I actually got to mow the lawn after we hadn't had any rain about a month and a half or two ago. And I could actually see coming out of the berm behind me, and basically where the water traveled, because that grass was green and it runs through my house. It literally was running through our house. We've cleaned out our drain tile around for the sump. We've had it all blown out. Is finally, after spending enough money, we've kind of got it under control. When it rains real hard, which we've had some horrible rains this year, and it creates problems. My sump pump runs every 20 seconds. So there's a substantial amount of water that is being stored and coming through there. I did take some pictures. I walked up and took pictures of the development behind us when I was here at that last meeting. It was said that all the drainage would go to their street side. And I do have pictures of the houses if you wish to see them, that all the drainage off the back of those homes go towards us. There's a place down the block from me where the water runs across the sidewalk all the time. It's orange. The sidewalk is orange. 40-year life. I've already paid for this once. Actually, it was replaced again because they didn't properly install it the first time. My sidewalk is horrific. We have replaced our entire driveway because it was completely busted into 4-inch size squares because of the amount of water. We had blacktop, by the way, so concrete would have been a little hard to do. But we've done a lot of things to keep up our home and keep it in livable condition. The drain tile question I have is, how deep does it go? Because if it's not going below the frost line, it's not going to work. You're just going to have water backing right back up. It's going to freeze on cold winters when we have no snow, and it's going to back its way back up the hill, which is towards our homes. So I don't mind if you do something, but do it right, because it didn't get done right the first time. It's actually been done worse as time's gone on with the development that's been in the area. I said it the last time, just because you own property as an investment doesn't necessarily always mean that it's a good investment. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Ryman. I see no questions for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you wish to speak to?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Joanne Stange, and I live at 2029 Declaration Drive. I just have a few comments to make in addition to what Jim just told you. We bought the house in October of '92, and in the next summer, curb and gutter was put in. And so this will be the second time that I get to pay for curb and gutter. Since the curb and gutter were installed, we've had water in front of our house probably continuously. I have a picture in my mind of my granddaughter at 3 years old slopping around in the water in her boots, having a wonderful time because there was so much water in front of my house. In the winter, the water is ice. I can't walk into the street to get my mail. I reach over from behind so that I can stay on the ground rather than walk in on the ice skating rink. That's what I call it. Let's see. Last summer and the winter previous, I had water sitting in my yard on would be the southwest corner of my front yard, back almost all the way to my house, sitting water. I couldn't mow. I had a new tree planted there which drowned and had to be removed. So what happened, how that became better, was because Jim had to put all that expensive work into his yard to try to combat the problem that we have. That didn't happen until the berm was built behind. And we've been here before in reference to that. So the water that was going to be drained to the east from the berm is coming to the west. It's coming into our yards. I was able to connect onto what Jim did, so I didn't have to spend thousands of dollars. I spent like $350. So thanks to him, I was able to do that. I'm on sump pump number 4. So that tells you how much water there is out there. That tells you how much water there is coming through continuously. The berm compounded the problem we already had out there. I guess my main concern, the only other thing I care to say, is that I'm happy something is going to be taken care of out there. Obviously, it needs it. My concern is it going to be the right thing? Is it going to be enough? That's my big concern. It would really be nice to have this taken care of once and for all. And if there maybe a further study needs to be done on what's really going on out there, there is a lot of groundwater, but that's not the whole problem. So, those are my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Sankey.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the credits for the sidewalk. Does that mean is that going to be credited towards the entire project, and then the project will be redistributed, the bill will be redistributed for the assessment, or is it going to only be refunded to the property owner that doesn't have water problems, that doesn't have any cracked sidewalk?
We'll try to answer that question, but we might have to have a little more detailed answer for you tomorrow.
Yeah.
We'll try.
The credits would go back to the individual property owner for the sidewalk in front of their property.
The credit goes back to the individual property owner. Sir?
Thank you, Council. My name's Jack Hestican. I live at 1909 Declaration Drive. I've lived there for 18 years. I have a sump pump in the basement. I've never had water in my basement. I don't even have a sump pump. I've never had water issues. We had ash trees in the front of the house when we got noticed that we need to remove the ash trees. City came and took the ash trees. Now I got this notice and they're gonna take and they replanted the trees. They're growing now, but they're gonna take the trees out when they come through to put in sidewalk. I may have one square that's up a little bit, and that's probably from root. I've never had a drainage issue. I've never had a problem. I just was concerned with the estimate that I got.
It sounds like understandably. What usually happens is, I don't know if we've done this yet, the city engineer visits with each of you personally to look at the sidewalk and assess whether that you'll get the credit, and you may not need any new sidewalk.
Okay.
Mr. Feber, do you want to corroborate?
I believe this was the property that our forestry crew went in to plant, and they, after removing the grass, they ran into standing water. So they did plant there were a couple of young trees that were planted, but they're not going to make it because they're in a lot of water. But the other answer to your question is if your sidewalk is in good condition, the plan is to still replace it, but you would get a credit back for those pieces that had not moved.
What about the approach?
That would not include the approach. We're only talking about the sidewalk. The approach and the driveway would be the property owner's responsibility.
Yeah, but if there's nothing wrong with them, my approach is beautiful.
Then your approach wouldn't even be touched then.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Feber, do you know if does it include any boulevard planting, tree replacement?
Yeah, we would replace those trees that would be taken out. There are some ash trees that you can see the roots have started to ball around themselves, so they're not going to make it. We did plant some young trees. Forestry crew just left them there knowing that they're going to come back out. So hopefully the drain tile will solve the problem of those new bare root trees sitting in a puddle of water.
Councilmember.
Could I ask?
Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. Mr. Fever, just to be clear then, this project does not include curb and gutter. The curb and gutter is not going to be touched.
That's correct.
Just sidewalk.
Just sidewalk.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Feber, I just want to ask a question that I think I heard from some of the folks who talked tonight, and just wondering if you can share maybe the process that staff took on determining this approach and why staff is convinced that this is the best approach to take over other approaches, just because people will be paying some money and they're saying, by and large, we need this, we need a solution, we hope this works. So what kind of...
Well, this is the most inexpensive solution to attempt at this point in time. The plan calls for drain tile in the back of the curb, and then it would drain directly into the storm sewer, into the inlets that are periodically spaced throughout the street. So that's the plan. There's no plan to put drain tile down 4 feet below the frost level or anything like that. That would be a very expensive solution.
Our meeting is just about over, and if you feel like you want some follow-up information, I'm happy to stand here and help connect you with additional information you might be interested in. Thank you.
Councilmember Von Hayden, Mr. Feber? Oh, sorry.
It appears to me on the surface that we're kind of dipping into this and really not solving the problem, from what I gather. And it's the berm on the back. Has any analysis been done to try to take a look at what's the root of the problem, as Tim was getting at originally on this thing?
No, we haven't. The engineering division hasn't looked into the cause of the water problem. From our understanding is that there's been a water problem out there for numerous property owners for years, even before any berm or the new street in the back was built.
Right. No, I'm aware of the water problem being out there because I was here when we had the original discussion on the berm and the other things that was done. But that supposedly was going to help alleviate the problem rather than compound it. So is there anything that can be done, taking a look at that so that we can do something to try to get to the root of the problem? I realize that the groundwater is a different scenario because that's always been there. But if the berm has compounded it, isn't there some responsibility someplace that should be looked at?
Well, it'll probably be the city's responsibility at this point in time. I'd have to check with the city attorney, but once the street goes in, when does it become our responsibility versus the developer who put in that infrastructure in the 90s?
I hear what you're saying, but that I agree. It may be the city's responsibility, but we do have a responsibility to take care of our citizens.
Councilmember Strobel?
I was on the same area there on that berm. If it was supposed to be draining east and it's draining west, how long ago was that put in? And because when you do site plans and all those things that usually through the plan commission, it sort of stipulates how that's all supposed to happen. How old is this one?
How old is
the berm that went in?
Is Concord, that street? I'd have to look to see when that street went in. From this aerial's probably 6 years old. There were only 4 homes built at that time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feber. I think you're unfortunately bearing the brunt of our frustration. We do understand that we have to take care of our citizens, and we know you understand that too.
Right.
Thank you. Councilmember T-Wall.
Thank you, Council President. I do want to just add I'll probably put this in email as well, that I think we need to ask the city to look at that, whether the technique is a monitoring wells or where is the source of the water and how do we deal with it? Because repeated repairs are obviously expensive and we want to have a solution that actually works. So that's my urgence to the city. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll have a good discussion tomorrow on this. So, is there anyone else who wants to speak to this item? Yeah. Seeing no one, and that the work of this commission, or the city council, has come to a close on a motion to adjourn by Councilmember Larson and seconded by Councilmember Mitchell. We are adjourned without objection.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org. This program is recorded and presented by Chippewa Valley Community Television. The audio for this program can be heard on WRFP LP 101.9 FM. This is a rebroadcast of the Eau Claire City Council meeting.
This meeting of the Eau Claire City Council will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Here.
Emmanuel?
Here.
Kincaid?
Here.
Clinkhammer?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Mitchell?
Here.
Strobel?
Here.
T-Wall?
Here.
Von Hayden?
Here.
Worthman?
Here.
John?
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Tuesday, August 23rd, 2016 session of the Eau Claire City Council. During its legislative session, the council deliberates and takes action on the agenda items before us. We have prepared for this duty by working with staff and working with citizens, by holding public discussions and public hearings when warranted, and by reading the considerable amount of materials in our packet. And we are ready this afternoon to fulfill our responsibility. We welcome those of you who are joining us in chambers and to those watching or streaming on community television. Council does have important items on its agenda, so let's begin our work, which starts with the consent agenda. Do council members have questions or wish to remove an item for separate consideration? On a motion then by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Strobel, the consent agenda is moved and discussion is in order. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Clinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
T-Wall?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman?
And the consent agenda is passed. Our business agenda begins with item 12, a resolution granting a temporary Class B fermented malt beverage license to St. Patrick Parish for Time and Treasure Fall Party and the Irish Fair on September 10th. Mr. Hofer.
This event is very similar to other events that have been held at Sacred Heart and St. Patrick's Parish. This is for a temporary beer license. Similar to prior events, the parking lot area between the buildings is going to be fenced off, and that's where alcohol will be served and consumed. In talking with the applicant, again, operationally, it's very similar to past events they've had there. They have not had any problems. If you look at the expectations are very much the standard expectations that we have for temporary alcohol licenses. They're going to check all IDs. They're going to wristband. They're going to have licensed bartenders on site and enough volunteers to make sure there's no alcohol being carried off the premise or any underage consumption. So there was no objections among the members of the License Review Committee, and I'm not sure if the applicant is here to answer questions or not.
Questions for Mr. Hofer? Is the applicant in? Do you wish to say anything about your event, or?
Pretty much as he said.
Okay.
It's actually not a parking lot, it's the lawn between the church.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Seeing no questions then, on a motion by Councilmember Beaton, seconded by Councilmember Worthman, item 12 is moved and discussion. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Clinkhammer?
Aye.
Larson?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel? T-Wall?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Worthman? Beaton?
Aye. And that resolution passes. Good luck with your event. Item 13 starts a series of resolutions regarding Special Olympics and the Buckshot Run, beginning with number 13, a resolution authorizing the Special Olympics to conduct the Little Buckshot Run on Tuesday, August 30th in Carson Park.
Do you want to run through these one at a time? It's probably the easiest
okay.
thing to do.
Sure.
Okay, so there are actually two separate events. So the Little Buckshot Run is a 2-mile run that takes place on Tuesday, on the Tuesday before Labor Day. And we'll talk about the Sunday race, which is 2 events. Anyway, on this Tuesday event, this race is held to accommodate those people that'll be gone on Labor Day weekend. This is a way that they can participate in a run. They can still contribute to fundraising for the Special Olympics. It's held after work, so they're actually 6 o'clock. The race takes place entirely within Carson Park. They're interested in having beer at this event. They are proposing to not have a fenced-in area, but instead have a fenced-in area supervised by people and signage. They would be using this area up here near the Pine Pavilion. So there'll be an area in here that will designate the beer area. That's really the only concern that we have with this event. It's the one new thing that's associated with this event. And they have elected they would rather not use fencing, the orange plastic fencing, but would rather have signage and supervisors that maintain that area and keep the alcohol contained to that area. So that's the little. We found in our special events meeting that many people assume that the Little Buckshot is an event for children. It is not. It is a regular full race for adults, but there were a number of people that felt it was a youth event, and it's not. It's youth are welcome to participate in the event and may be spectators at the event, but it is an event for people who cannot make the Sunday race on Labor Day weekend. Any questions about that event?
Questions for Mr. Feber? Councilmember Emanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Feber. If this goes through with no amendments, will there be a fence required, or would council need to change that to remove a fence?
No, the Special Events Committee recommended approval of the event with the supervision and the signage that would notify people that there's no alcohol beyond this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Feber, did you cover items 13 and 14, or
Well, I
just
didn't.
Ms. Stromberger?
I didn't, but do you want a separate presentation on the alcohol?
No, I just wondered about the proper protocol. We could try this.
Anything else?
Ms. Stromberger, do you have anything to add to the alcohol license application?
Just a couple little things. My map is better than Mr. Feber's.
Your map is better.
Thank you. I think so.
For
yes.
that. And you didn't need help either.
Right.
You had it all ready. So, thank you.
This is a map the applicant submitted showing where they will post the signs, as well as volunteers in the area where beer and wine are to be consumed. And they are applying for beer and wine for both the Little Buckshot and the Buckshot Run. Service will be from 6 to 8 on the Little Buckshot Run, and then I believe from noon to about 2 on the Buckshot Run. And they will be using wristbands, clear cups, all the standard requirements we have of a special event like this.
Very enlightening. Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Von Hayden has a question.
My question gets back to the elimination of the fence. Have we had many events yet? I know we approved one for a while back. What was that? The marathon. Right. So, but we haven't had much experience with it yet, have we?
We haven't had a ton. The biggest one that comes to mind is the Taste of the Valley. They did not have to have fencing. That one was approved a few months ago.
And from the best of everybody's knowledge and experience on that, it worked fine?
As far as I've heard, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know, if we had the experience of basis to eliminate the fence.
Thank you, both. Oh, are you done? No.
Do you want me to present the Sunday race with the two events? Do that right away, or?
We'll just vote on this.
Okay.
It's better if we keep things simple. So we have two things to vote on, okay? So item 13 is moved on a motion by Councilmember Larson and seconded by Councilmember Mitchell. Discussion on the event itself. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Wall.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emanuel.
Aye. And that resolution passes. And item 14 grants the temporary Class B fermented malt beverage and wine license we just discussed, and is moved on a motion by Councilmember Emanuel, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer. Discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Seawald.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Eaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
And that resolution passes. What's the proper protocol about that?
Councilmember John.
Aye.
Now, item 15 authorizes the Special Olympics on September 3rd, and 16 is a related matter authorizing the wine application.
So
Mr. Fieber.
the Buckshot Run, again, proceeds going to the Special Olympics, a fundraiser. The difference between the Tuesday race and the Sunday race is that the Sunday race has a 5K run, which goes outside the park on Cameron Street and then back down through Park Ridge, past the Rod and Gun Club, and then back into the park. They would have alcohol in the afternoon in the same area that this wonderful map shows, and that's essentially the difference there between that race and the Tuesday race. Any questions on that event?
Questions for Mr. Fieber? I see none, and thank you. Ms. Stromberger, do you have anything to add? On a motion and by Councilmember T-Walt, seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden, item 15 is moved. Discussion. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Larson.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Seawald.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman. John.
Aye.
Eaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 16 is moved on a motion by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Beaton. Discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Seawald.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Eaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 17 moves on to a final resolution approving the project and levying special assessments for sidewalk improvements on Declaration Drive, east of LaSalle and Stotts Avenue. Mr. Fieber.
I have some comments and answers to some of the questions that were posed last night. Our city engineers are both on vacation, except you see one came back from vacation to be here to answer questions. We wanted to make sure that the council understood that the request to replace the sidewalk was driven by the property owners on Declaration Drive, that the engineers received numerous requests from the homeowners to attempt to fix the problem. They have numerous tripping hazards and damage to their snow blowers and would like to see the city try something yet this winter or prior to this winter. Unfortunately, the neighborhood was built on a perched water table on shalestone. There are numerous developments like that around Eau Claire. The developer built the home and accommodated by installing sump pumps in the homes. Sump pumps appear to be working, as we did not hear about water in the basements yesterday, but we rather heard that sump pumps were running constantly, so they were doing their job. The entire development, including the sidewalks we were discussing, were constructed by the developer, not the city, or some combination where there was a transition at that point in time. But for the most part, they were constructed. The current sidewalk and streets, curb and gutter, was all constructed by the developer. The problem on Declaration existed prior to Concord Street. So while some have contended that the change in drainage on Declaration occurred because of the construction that happened on Concord, actually the engineers feel that the drainage on Lexington or on Declaration has actually improved because of the construction and the road that has taken place on Concord. So that's their feeling, that the situation has actually improved from past years. We need to also remember, they reminded us that we've had 4 or 5 very dry summers up until this time. So we may be noticing a bigger problem more because of the weather and not necessarily because of the construction on Concord. The berm, one of the engineers inspected Concord Street today and found the berm to be pitched in the correct direction towards the street, and found surface drainage to be pitched in that direction and not pitched towards the homeowners on Declaration. But that was a very quick survey, but they'd be willing to do a more in-depth survey, but their initial indications are that water is not being directed from Concord to Declaration. Staff was very adamant that installing this drain tile on the backside of the sidewalk will have a profound effect on improving the situation and protecting the city asset of the sidewalk. It will not improve the groundwater table that's around the homes, around the neighborhood. The entire Pinehurst area drains. I mean, it's essentially a bowl and drains in that direction. And it would be a rather large job to try to redirect groundwater in that area. Postponing the project to another council meeting for whatever reason would likely prohibit the project from being completed during this construction season, would force it into another construction season, which is not what we heard from a number of residents, not those that were at the meeting last night. And also to point out, the sidewalk credits are normally given to homeowners when their sidewalk fails during the initial 10-year payment period. This project, however, provides credits to homeowners for the parts of the sidewalk that are still deemed serviceable by the engineering staff. So that, I hope, answered that question about when credits are normally issued. So people who have a sidewalk that's still serviceable, it might be shifted, are going to receive full credit for that. So there could be a gentleman, the gentleman, for example, last night that didn't have any issues with his sidewalk is likely to receive a full credit for his sidewalk. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you want to ask some questions of one of the engineers, we could bring Doug up.
Looks like we have some questions. I saw Councilmember Von Hayden's reply first.
Yeah, just primarily related to the question that was raised last night, and you've answered it pretty much so, but I would appreciate it if our staff, our engineering staff especially, could talk to the one individual that has the major water problem, where he said his did increase as a result of that, and if they could take a look at that one in particular to see if there is something that might be related to it or not, so that he gets his questions answered, because I think it's unfair to a homeowner if we did something with the other street. And I'm not disputing what you said by looking at what's there, but I think it probably would be beneficial to talk to that individual and help clarify that situation.
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strobel.
Thank you. Also, it's my understanding that we have used drain tile in a few other places in the city, so we have done that in the past by the sidewalks. But we're not going to special assess the property owners for doing that for them. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's
It's
part of the project, so it's a little more expensive, so they're paying for part of it.
They are?
That's part of the $72,000 project. That cost is included.
So they are going to be special assessed for it?
Correct.
Because that was my understanding, that they would not be special assessed for that part of it.
The property owners only will be special assessed for the sidewalk or driveway approach if we had to replace it, but for the drain tile, they won't be special assessed.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that is a benefit to the property owners as well.
It is a benefit. There's the other thing that can happen is the drain tile will be run along there. They'll be able to connect their drain tile if they want, or their sump pump into it is a possibility also, so it will help that. Many years ago when I worked in the Fox Cities, we built what they called mini storm sewers for that purpose. Exactly what we're doing up in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Faber, and thank you for coming back from vacation. I think you should get double extra vacation whenever that happens. Question to clarify, is the 72,000 the total cost for the project? Or does that include what the property owners will be paying, or is what the property owners would pay would be above and beyond the 72?
That's included in there. The total cost of the project is 72. The homeowners are going to be paying probably in the a third of that. The city would be paying the other 2/3.
Okay, thank you.
Depending on the credits for the existing sidewalk.
And a brief follow-up. I was able to get the contact information for the gentleman that Councilmember Von Hayden was indicating last night, so I'm happy to share that with you or the city manager.
Yeah, I have that also.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, further questions? Councilmember Klinkhammer?
Not a question so much as it is, I have to admit that I had a lot of questions last night, and I appreciate very much the added information and the greater insight into what this project is, so thank you.
Sure.
And thank you, likewise.
Okay.
On a motion then by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Zhang, item 17 is moved and discussion is in order. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Strobel,
Aye.
T-Wall,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Jean.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye. And that resolution passes. And thank you for the added expertise in helping us out. Council, that brings to a close our business agenda. Is that right? Yeah. We have two ordinances for action tonight. Item 18 is an ordinance rezoning property located at the southeast corner of US Highway 12 and North Town Hall Road from C2P to C3P for a quick trip and truck stop. Before we begin action on this item, the chair takes her prerogative to remind council of our duty in regards to rezoning requests, which is to enact, reject, or amend petitions to rezone based on the merits of the request, compatibility with existing zoning, consistency with the comprehensive plan, and input from the applicant and the neighbors. We have performed this duty. These and these alone should enter into our decision. Let us not stray from this wise guide. We have not done so heretofore, and let us not begin now. Do council members have questions regarding the presentation from last evening? There being none, on a motion, I think I was around to Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Mitchell. Item 18 is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Beat.
Some may know that I have some issues with this item, but however, I believe that those issues are nationally based issues, and so like the chair has expressed, I don't think it's even before writing an op-ed, I recognize that those issues are not appropriate to be judging local issues with, and so I will be supporting this item.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. There are a number of issues that came up last night that I think, when we look at that development and the fact that subdevelopment is going to be filled up in the next few years, this issue with truck parking, the potential of 24 hours trucks coming in and out of that area, the issue of diesel fumes, the issue of potentially noise and we know that there will be a screening around it, but potentially headlights as well, I think are things that most neighbors in our community would not want to live across from. And so, those neighbors are not in front of us, and those homes haven't been built yet, but we do know that that area is slated for development. And, I think that those things compounded with the fact that it makes it absolutely more difficult than it already is for people to walk and to bicycle around that neighborhood, brings up major concerns for me about whether, it would be one thing, I think, if it was just a regular Quick Trip, but the fact that it includes the 24 truck parking spaces, I think is a heavy impact on right next to houses. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of neighbors who are going to be in their homes right next to that. And to me, that doesn't speak to compatibility, which is one of the key, as the council president pointed out, one of the key things that we need to decide is whether this is compatible with the neighborhood as it develops right next door. So in light of those things, this evening, I won't be supporting this rezone request.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember Mitchell.
Well, I think that based on what we read in the newspaper this morning, we are left to ask ourselves if there is a political test to be administered regarding this zoning request. And for me, I have to say that the answer is absolutely not. And for those that think that the zoning code is a kind of narrow criteria, I would remind us that it is zoning that keeps this community developing in an orderly fashion. And I object strongly to the zoning code being used for partisan political purposes. And I will definitely be supporting this request. Thank you. Councilmember Dewell.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councilmember Mitchell, for those words. I echo those. But I just want to state, Quick Trip is a great employer. They're a good neighbor. I've got students who work for them. They've done good. They've met the requirements. It is a small change in zoning from C2 of one type to C3 and with conditions, and they have met those conditions. So I think that's something we have. They meet a demand we must have for our economy. I remember this is go way back. This is like 16 years ago when the earth was going to end. And the computers would go from 1999 to 2000, and all transportation could end. And they realized this is how important trucking is. This now is the serious point. In 24 hours, we'd be out of food in Eau Claire. We depend on trucking to keep this economy, to keep our hospitals open, to keep our shelters open, to keep our food chain open. Trucking is vital. It was interesting, there was legislation out east. I was talking to a trucker. They're not allowed to run their trucks in winter because that would use fuel. And it gets very cold there as well. They are not allowed to come into town and park anywhere because that would look bad on the town. If they are late to the delivery, then they are lost great funds. So then they were able to find a loophole. They got a little dog or cat. Well, then you could run the truck to have heat, because that would be inhumane. But the people who deliver our wares that keep this economy going. It is a small trucking park. I've been in these. I used to RV, and it is something to be in the large ones. I think this will work in that neighborhood, and I think we could look at zoning for that associated area should that ever be needed. We don't have the neighbors there. I think they've done the safeguards the planning committee has asked, and I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Any new voices? Back to Councilmember Worthman then.
Thank you, Council President Kincaid. Last week, a whole number of constituents that I represent had seen the news from La Crosse that in fact Quick Trip was hosting a fundraiser for Donald Trump. Now, a lot of people knowing that this was coming up were saying, can't we deny, Council President, if I might
A point of
add
order.
clarity to Councilmember Mitchell's statement.
A point of order has been raised, which the chair grants and asks you to redirect your point,
Certainly.
or cease your point or redirect it.
Essentially, that I'm in full agreement with Councilmember Mitchell in the sense that with constituents asking me whether we as a city could deny on certain grounds, making clear, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And in full agreement that bringing partisan politics into a zoning request is not allowed. And if we want to ask who's partisan, that's a question. That's a fair question. Who's being partisan in this equation? But that aside, the fact is that Councilmember Beaton and myself still found it important to bring up that conversation because so many people were asking for that. And if you look at the headline of the newspaper, it says zoning decision.
Point of order, Councilmember Worthman. You have strayed from the parameters of a discussion of request of considering a rezoning request.
Okay.
And I ask you to cease your point.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the rezoning request? There being none, clerk, please call the roll. An aye vote grants the rezoning. Madam?
Councilmember T-Wall.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Workman.
No.
John.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Clinkhammer.
Aye.
Larson.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
And that ordinance is adopted. Our last item tonight is an ordinance rezoning, or an ordinance amending Chapter 18.25 of the Code entitled Off-Street Parking and Loading Requirements. Council members have questions from our discussion last evening. I imagine there might be some. Councilmember Emmanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. This is for Mr. Tufti. And I thank you, Mr. Tufti, for making some time today to help me learn even more. So one of the things that I wanted to ask about are, I'll start with this question, and I think there's an amendment coming that I can ask a follow-up later. But the question is, if these changes go through, will this unilaterally forbid any developer from asking for any differentiation from what might be passed? Meaning, what would that look like? Where is that codified? And what is our experience what is the Plan Commission's experience in granting changes?
There are provisions, existing code, and then added with this amendment that allow Plan Commission to reduce the parking requirement based on a study provided by applicant. And those provisions existing are Provision 4 and Provision 5, and now also added is Provision 6. This is just if the applicant can show that the parking requirement within our code is not needed for their development based on whatever facts, they can provide that to the Plan Commission in a letter or a study. This is for joint use parking, and this is based on mixed use parking or other types of analysis. And the Plan Commission has considerable experience in considering those types of requests. They've been doing it for a number of years, and it's certainly available for developers, and it was actually stated at the Plan Commission meeting it's expected that we'll see those in the future with this change.
Follow-up? So that I'm understanding this correctly and for our public conversation, let's say there's a scenario where there's a unit that's being built that's for a family that would have maybe 2 bedrooms, a parent, 2 children. The children may not need a parking stall because hopefully they're on their bikes or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a good situation where they could say, hey, I'd like to have a consideration made. And that consideration can come in the form of a study or just through the developer writing a letter themselves saying, I would like you to consider this and here's why?
Yes, a family type development proposal is a good example. Another one commonly seen by Plan Commission is elderly projects where the folks may not drive. That's commonly seen by the Plan Commission. It comes typically in the form of a letter from the developer.
Thank you.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
Following up on that, this is no requirement of size. In other words, it can be any unit as long as there's a bona fide reason for them to request a variance from the parking requirements.
Yes, and there's also a long-standing attitude by the Plan Commission to require development based on the parking that is needed for the development, not to overpark it. They understand clearly we don't want a lot of asphalt in this community that's not being used, so it's a very clear understanding.
Okay. So this is not an attempt, what I'm following up on this, is that this is not an attempt to reduce density with a parking restriction.
I think the neighborhood association may view it as that. I think the Plan Commission views it as we need to make sure, particularly in these older neighborhoods, that these developments have adequate parking and we're not getting more of this parking out on the street.
Okay. The density issue, I realize that's not what we're voting on is the density issue, but that should really be called by zoning rather than parking restrictions. Would that not be a best assumption?
It typically is, but one can say that this will indirectly affect density simply in order to fit all of this on a property. It'll likely mean developers have to do slightly smaller projects because they just don't simply have the room to get the added parking on the site. And then again, the Plan Commission views it as they need that added parking because we're simply not getting enough of it into these older neighborhoods.
Okay, so it will get back to, in these cases, a much greater discussion with the Planning Commission on some of these units then.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, and if the Planning Commission deems that they need more parking, that could then affect the density of the project.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell, thank you. Mr. Tufte, we got a letter this afternoon from Mr. Shepke, and I wanted to ask you to comment on a few of the statements that he makes in his letter.
Okay.
Not to be crabby at Mr. Shepke, I just like to hear your opinion about his claims. So do you think that the changes in this ordinance will discourage multifamily development or reduce the amount of green space in a project?
I don't think it'll discourage multifamily development. There's a market out there. The development community is very aware of it, and they are going to provide the multifamily development this community needs, and they'll adjust over time to these new standards. In terms of reducing green space, I don't believe that happens simply because we have ordinance standards that the Plan Commission uses in review of development that assures that green space is provided with projects.
Could you elaborate on that just a little bit more, on the green space part?
I can actually give you an example. This is JCAP's project at 2nd and Chippewa. These two buildings have been built, and these two we are anticipating to be built in the near future. The parking requirement is the back 20 feet of the property, and to add more parking on this project, it simply isn't possible because they pretty much paved the entire back 20 feet of the property. To add parking up into the site in order to meet the parking requirement, the Plan Commission is going to say, well, you can't do that. Now you're impacting the green space for the project. So this is a typical design that we see in the older neighborhood where they're maximizing the amount of parking for the project. They're providing their required green space around the buildings, and that then sets the amount of development that they can provide on the sites. And it's a standard that we're seeing repetitively now at the Plan Commission meeting in terms of they pave that back all the way across. That's the maximum parking they can put on the site. The green space is left for the rest of the projects, and then that sets the building size for the project. So green space I don't see varying for these projects.
Councilmember Strobel?
Thank you. Mr. Tufti, on that same diagram you put up there, could these developers not have off-site parking where they had a contract to park
Yes.
people elsewhere?
That would be one way in which they could still do a project like this and go off-site with their parking
And
requirements.
so then you'd actually have the same density?
No, then you'd likely see, then they'd propose greater densities with these projects. The reason we don't see that happening is it costs money to go off sites. Normally, since these neighborhoods are fully developed, there's not a vacant property out there for them to find for that added parking, so they're normally getting their property on site. An example where it happened the other way, though, was the Mogensen project on the 200 block of Water Street, that big mixed-use building that they'll be starting now this fall. There they actually went off-site, and Mr. Mogensen will be taking down a couple of homes in order to provide his parking requirement for that mixed-use building.
And that's my point here. There's a lot of homes down there that are maybe not that desirable, and the developer certainly could buy one of those homes, tear it down, and put the parking there, contract it there. And I wonder if, when we were talking about the East Side Hill Neighborhood Plan and on the Plan Commission and stuff, you talked about how nice it is in Eau Claire that we have these neighborhoods that don't have these empty lots in between them.
Mhm.
And, that's a very important and desirable thing. And I wonder if by doing this, we're not going to get to a point where we're having vacant lots there that are going to be used for parking. And the unintended consequence of this potentially.
The Plan Commission's aware of that issue also. With the Mogensen project on Water Street, he actually originally came in and proposed parking on the north side of Chippewa. And the Plan Commission said, no, that area needs to be redeveloped with homes or small apartments. And if we're going to put in these parking lots, it needs to be on the south side of Chippewa, backing onto Water Street, so that we're not spreading these types of vacant lots, as you call it, out into the neighborhood. And again, that's consistent with the neighborhood plan in terms of minimizing where these parking lots are within the neighborhood.
Could I get a follow-up? Then the other question I had for you is on the adverse effect on multifamily, and in particular three-bedroom homes.
Mhm.
That I know that I talked to several developers that actually have projects going or are going to have projects going, and it would impact them as they would not be able to get the required parking on their lots. And so we may have less three-bedroom facilities going up. Is that accurate?
I would encourage those developers that if they're building three-bedroom units for individual rentals, such as student rentals, that they provide that parking simply because it's needed for that type of situation. I would encourage those developers, though, if they're building three-bedroom units for families, which likely then don't need that parking, they provide that parking study or analysis to the Plan Commission and allow them to consider, okay, this is likely in an area where we're going to have family housing, and therefore we'll allow the reduction, which is provided in this amendment.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tebow?
Thank you, Council President. Two questions, if I may. One, the plan that you had up on Chippewa, would that meet the proposed ordinance change?
No. They would actually have to slightly reduce the units within this project in order to meet the new standards
Okay.
of the code. What we find in the older neighborhoods, the developers are maximizing out the parking and the reductions that are allowed under code to maximize the number of units that they're being built on these projects. What we find in our newer developments, like out at Oakwood Mall or the Metropolis over by Shopko, they don't even ask for the transit or bike reductions. In fact, they actually put in extra parking in those areas simply because they have available land to do it. So I don't see this change having a substantial effect on projects outside of these older neighborhoods simply because they're already putting in
more parking than our code provides. I do see it affecting projects such as this simply because they asked for all the reductions that they could get. They maximized their parking, and that then set the amount of development on there. If we now say, well, you got to provide a little bit more parking for that development, the only way they can do it is they got to actually reduce the units slightly to do it.
And then the second question, you mentioned they could say, well, this is for family dwelling rather than rental. Can you just speak to the probability of acceptance by the planning committee in general? Is that something that they rarely will ever give a variation? Is it not infrequent? I'm just looking for the history of it, and I'm unaware of it, so I don't know.
Yeah, they are commonly giving those variations and rarely saying no.
Bravo. Okay, thank you.
New voice, Councilmember Emanuel. We'll get back to you, too.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Out of fairness, I did ask the first question, but maybe I'm the first voice in the second round. Okay, thank you. Mr. Tufte, I had received I had some conversations with some folks in the development community who were maybe seemed to be under the impression that this is being driven by a neighborhood group and that these changes are just for a neighborhood group. And I'm wondering if you can clarify for our public conversation, what is the origin of the changes and why are we considering them today?
This is primarily driven by the Plan Commission members, not staff, Plan Commission members. They have been reviewing development proposals now for a number of years. They've expressed concerns that particularly in the older neighborhoods, there have been approving projects and they're wondering, are we requiring enough parking within those older neighborhoods? They see projects coming in, again, out at Oakwood Hills, and they're not being asked for reductions. There's more than enough parking, but in these older neighborhoods, they are expressing concerns. They then, the Plan Commission placed in the 2015 Comprehensive Plan Update a work program for 2016 to consider reviewing and updating our parking standards. That plan was approved by council, and in 2016, they've spent 9 months and 4 meetings having various discussions in terms of the changes that we've brought forward to the council.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
You said it'd be a slight reduction. What is the amount of the reduction that would be approximately on that?
I'm looking, we had a table that gave examples, and I'm wondering if the GCAP project was in it. It is. This is a table I believe Mr. Mogensen showed you last night, and we presented it to the Plan Commission. The JCAP project are the fourplexes on Chippewa Street. Their parking requirement under present code is 36 stalls, and with the amendments you're considering today, it would increase by 3 stalls. Meaning in order to build this project, they have to come up with 3 fewer bedrooms in order to build that project on the site.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Councilmember Strobel?
3 fewer bedrooms, that was going to get to my next point. It's based on the bedrooms. Could they not just build a little bit bigger bedroom and put 2 beds in there and have the same amount of density that they have now? I mean, what is stopping them from doing that?
Nothing. Market basically is assisting in terms of we find more and more of the student housing in the community is based on 1 student per bedroom, but I have found that that's not always the case. And as long as you don't run into a definition of rooming house, which is you can only have 4 unrelated in a dwelling unit, you can take a 2-bedroom and put 2 students in each bedroom, and your parking requirement is based on the number of bedrooms. That's very difficult for us to administratively regulate, is who occupies a structure, where we can very easily regulate by number of bedrooms in a structure. So that's why most parking codes that we see are based on a bedroom count for number of dwelling units.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Tupti, one of the letters that we received from developers last night discussed this idea of sort of how do we incentivize, in the other direction, how do we incentivize more multimodal and, essentially encourage more bicycles, encourage less students to think it's a good idea to bring their car.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we go in that direction? And was that brought up in the Plan Commission discussion over the last couple of years?
I think the code amendment that now has a bike parking requirement has taken a step in that direction. This code amendment does eliminate a vehicle reduction for providing that bike parking requirement. The Plan Commission had considerable discussion about that and then decided that, no, let's still allow that 5% reduction for providing your bike park in a central business district. Again, expressing that concern that bike park reduction and then an additional 5% bike park reduction if you doubled your bike parking was being used by developers to simply get more development on these types of sites. And they were having a concern with that. I think if that was allowed by the Plan Commission to be judged, in these instances it may make sense, in these instances it doesn't. Might be another way of doing that, but at this time the code basically says you get a 5% reduction if you put your bike park in. Well, they're putting their bike park in, and then they're building projects with less parking is the concern that they saw in these older neighborhoods.
Okay, further questions? The chair has one question for you.
Yes.
He just left his light on.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I've come to know all your habits, so figure that out. Do you think that, is there such a thing in the zoning world as a student housing district zoning code? And such that we could define an area that has X amount of student housing, identified as student housing, as a student housing district and treat it as a special entity, just like we do a central business district?
Yes.
Is that out there anywhere?
Yes. In fact, that was actually discussed as part of the Neighborhood Revitalization Task Force, is the idea of a conservancy overlay district. Although, and that basically doesn't change the zoning of our older neighborhoods, but you apply an overlay district such as a conservancy overlay district, and it allows you to add then additional provisions. It was talked about at the neighborhood task force level about using it to add additional design standards so that new development fits into these older neighborhoods. But you could also use that and add then additional parking requirements or different parking requirements within that conservancy area.
Well, that may be a long-term project, but it seems like we are a university town, and there's housing demand, and we want to be good neighbors and work together and on both sides. So
that's
a long-term thing.
2017 task for Plan Commission to take up. So it's something that could be done a year from now.
Okay. Okay, thank you for answering all of our questions. We might have more as we turn to discussion. Get back to my agenda here. Let's see. The chair is going to offer this ordinance on a motion by Councilmember Mitchell and Councilmembers Larson, who serve on the Plan Commission. So there we are. The item is moved and discussion or amendments are in order. Sometimes we have a little discussion before we offer an amendment right away. Councilmember Worthman.
Thank you, Council President. Just a first note that I think that your question to Mr. Peters is very, very relevant, and in fact, I think it's something we ought to consider with these sorts of changes. As we realized last night, we only really had people, I think, from one neighborhood come in and talk to us about this change and how important it was for their neighborhood. And I don't believe we had folks from, maybe some from the Third Ward and some from Historic Randall, but I don't believe we had folks from other areas. And I'm sort of the thinking that maybe we want to consider what the council president, her question about whether we might treat certain areas a little differently in terms of their parking requirements. So that's something I would be in favor of, at least just opening the dialogue for other council members to sort of give feedback on that idea.
Further discussion? Councilmember Larson.
Thank you. I'm going to support this this initiative. I think it was clear from Mr. Tufte's discussion just now that it allows the flexibility for the Plan Commission to grant variances when needed. Not all neighborhoods are the same. Not all density housing is the same. And but this allows us to relieve some of the pressure on the parking in some neighborhoods where that parking is especially crowded. And the Plan Commission can still, as they've already done, prevent additional parking lots in non-adjacent lots close by. And in looking at the material that was handed out yesterday regarding other cities, I don't think it's that far out of line, especially when you look at Whitewater, for example, where a one-bedroom apartment dwelling unit requires 2 spaces. A 2-bedroom requires 3 spaces, and 3 bedrooms require 4 spaces. So I don't think that this requirement is out of line with other jurisdictions. I think it allows us the flexibility, and it reduces the on-street parking pressure in neighborhoods where that has been a continuous problem for many, many years. And so I'm going to support this.
Thank you. Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. I'm going to support it as well. I would just note that the ordinance does contain some new sustainable transit demand initiatives like ride sharing and group transit passes and other things that we saw in our downtown parking study. I think that all of the changes are good for the neighborhoods, good for the city, but especially good for the renters. Imagine yourself without a driveway or a garage or any place to put your car, but on the street in the city all the time. And that's what we have in many of the older neighborhoods. Even with this change, the multifamily unit will not have 100% off-street parking if they live on a transit route. And now with the exceptions that we have, we're putting more and more cars out onto the street. And that impairs city services, plowing in the winter. If you will recall, when we talked about alternate side parking last year, we heard from a gentleman on First Avenue who at that time already had no place to park but on the street. And then people are walking 2 blocks or more away to park while the snowplows do their job. Garbage trucks, garbage delivery, as well as street cleaning, etc. And we're also have to remember that the renters are people who have lives. They have guests, they have boyfriends, they have girlfriends. And to Councilmember Strobel's point, 1 bedroom can have more than 1 person in it, and often does. And both of those people can have cars. So we have to provide, not just for the people in the houses, but as they do in other parts of town, provide extra parking because they know people are going to have guests and friends over. I'm not suggesting we can do that in the older neighborhoods, but at least we can get a little bit closer to having enough off-street parking for the renters. I see this as actually a very conservative change, and I hope that you will support it.
Thank you. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. In thinking about this and understanding some of the challenges in older neighborhoods, I had a gentleman this morning who stopped me who lives in the Third Ward neighborhood and said pulling out of his driveway is problematic and it's dangerous because there's so many cars there. And we kind of joked about the pun on don't be dense about hyper-dense areas that we may live in. And I think there's a lot of validity to that, of just kind of this domino effect that occurs with, I don't know if this is a public planning term, I think I made it up, but just this hyper-density that is being experienced in many neighborhoods, including the one that I live in. And I'm sensitive to the aspirations that our community has of where we want to be on multimodal transportation. I wish that we lived in a community where we could hop on the bus every 15 minutes or even every 20 or every 30 minutes. And that doesn't always happen. Maybe in some routes, it doesn't always happen. And that's a larger issue with some federal funding issues that are getting smaller and smaller with public transportation. And I think that's an issue that our community is working on with the prospects of the new transfer center and where do we locate that and how do we recalibrate things as we work within our very limited means on public transportation dollars. So I'm reminded of a phrase that I talked a lot about in my public policy graduate program, which is trying to find that right balance between the world that we as we want it to be and the world as it is. And I think that this is a very reasonable proposal to help us aspire to the world as we want it to be, and realizing some of the very practical limitations that our community still faces with not adequate public transportation and not and understanding that not everybody can take that. Even though my family, we ride that, my husband rides the bus and rides his bike or uses his legs just about every day to get to work or do errands, and that's an important way to get around. So at any rate, I think this is a reasonable request. I also think it's reasonable because of the provisions that applicants who are from the development community can come and ask for a variance. And it sounds like history has proven that those are thought of very seriously and granted at times. And the last thing I would like to say is that we need developers in our community. They play a very important role, especially in older neighborhoods, because there are many substandard housing conditions that people live in. And so even though I guess there's a trade-off when we lose a house, we're kind of losing a little bit of the old charm. However, bottom line is people need a safe place to live, and the development community certainly offers that, and so I'm grateful for that. So I'll be supporting this for those reasons.
Thank you. Further discussion or Councilmember Strobel?
I agree that probably a majority of the students do have cars and stuff, but I think we're trying to address density in one neighborhood within an ordinance that affects the whole city and a lot of other non-student housing options. I think if we're trying to change density, then we need to look at our zoning. Is our zoning correct or is it incorrect? If we want to address that density, I think we ought to address the zoning. I think the lady from Urban Assets, I think, said that our zoning looks pretty good, and it looks good for the neighborhood with the periphery of that RM, which will draw the students potentially out of those older homes into the newer student housing on the outskirts, and will potentially provide an opportunity for those homes to revert to single-family homes. I heard from a lot of the neighbors last night, and they're very unhappy about the parking in their neighborhoods. But a lot of them, it seemed to me, were caused by outside influences, maybe the hospital, maybe kids walking to the university that need to park nearby. To be honest, I think one of the things that causes the problems in these neighborhoods is the fact that the university doesn't provide parking. And you know, I think if they did, we might not have quite as big of issues on the streets. But I think also just because we provide off-street parking it doesn't mean it's gonna be used. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that, 4 single-family homes, owner occupied, right next to me. All 4 of those people have cars that are parked on the street every day. So, and they have room to park them off-street, but they don't do it. So I think if that's our goal, is to try to get people off-street, I'm not sure it's gonna accomplish that. And it affects every developer in every part of the city. So I would prefer this to be handled through a zoning change if we want to decrease density rather than doing it through our parking code. It's really a tough decision. I'm not quite sure how I'm going on it yet. I think you can see which way I'm leaning based on my comments, but it's been very difficult.
Further discussion? Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. I won't be supporting this tonight, but I want to say my deep appreciation toward the neighborhood for all of their work on this. Some of the concerns that have already been raised are concerns that I share in terms of how this impacts our entire city. And I don't really know that we got a good feeling for how that might look if it's out by the mall or if it's I used to live on Wisconsin Street, and there was definitely building there. How it might affect those kinds of developments. That's one concern that I have about this. Another concern would be the fact that there seemed to be a lot of anecdotal evidence provided last night about who is actually parking up the streets. And I would be more in favor of, and it seemed like the neighborhood was in favor of actually doing a study, if in fact there was a moratorium placed on new development in that time frame, which is something I would support. As a way to bridge a gap and actually understand how these problems are arising, exactly what we should do. I mean, we had a parking study that was conducted downtown, and I think it's really helping us figure out where we want to go right now, and helped us also consider putting up the ramp, which we did do. So I see value in doing a further study of this. I know that's probably not where the council's leaning at this point, and I respect that. One of the other things I want to point out is I think we have an issue here where essentially, if we provide more parking, it incentivizes more people bringing cars. And that's sort of a reality. I remember I went to Iowa State, and I think it's probably the same in Madison. It's very difficult to park in these places, and a lot of students will actually make a very conscious choice not to bring a car. And at Iowa State, that was exactly what happened. It just didn't make sense to bring a car. And in some ways, I wonder if we might want to be thinking about that, is if we incentivize and create the parking, and I assume this will create additional parking, that then it actually incentivizes folks who decide that is something they want to do. The other thing that was brought up last night is people who don't bring cars, but they will be paying for this. Students who don't bring cars to campus, who are renting, will end up paying the additional costs for the parking spots that are there. As Mr. Grager from the 3rd Ward had pointed out, there's a parking space in the back of his house that he pays for in some way through his rent, but he doesn't actually use it. I think sort of the final point on all of this is the fact that I think if we want to get serious and move in the direction of multimodal transportation, we have to create a serious demand for it in the city. And we're a growing city, and this is an issue that's definitely coming. And thinking about how do we create the demand, I'm concerned about the bike parking disincentivized in this ordinance. But I think if we're really serious about how do we go toward more multimodal, it's not building more parking spaces. It's creating the demand from people who are saying, I don't have any other options. Please, we need our city to invest. We need our city to get serious about this issue. That's how we're going to take those next steps in terms of providing those options. So those are some of the concerns, and I appreciate and respect all of my fellow council members for the different opinions that are on this, as well as the neighborhood and their work on this, but I won't be supporting it.
Councilmember Larson?
Thank you. I agree with some of these statements by those who may or may not support the ordinance. I still strongly support it. But I want to point out that there is, I agree with the statement that zoning is the way to deal with density. I don't agree that this is being done for density. It's being done to relieve the parking pressure in neighborhoods that have been overwhelmed by it for many, many years. And I don't agree that only 60 or even 70% of the students bring cars. I think it's much higher than that. It may be anecdotal, but it's been a long, long time of anecdotal, and I've seen it happen. So I do believe that more off-street parking in neighborhoods for that kind of dense housing is going to relieve some of the pressure. The other thing I want to say about zoning is currently some of our zoning in that Randall Park neighborhood doesn't even match our comprehensive plan. So maybe we should be looking at zoning. Maybe we should be downzoning some of that. But that's an issue for a different day. Today we're talking about relieving some of the pressure on parking for neighborhoods that need it. Now, when we develop in other neighborhoods where the density isn't quite as high, or the parties involved are elderly or more family oriented, then waivers or variances can be issued by the Plan Commission. So it's not like it's a one size fits all for the entire city. There is flexibility in this, and I just want people to remember that.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
The variance process makes some sense. However, one of the things we got to remember is what we're trying to do here in the city of Eau Claire is we're trying to grow, prosper, and to do that we need development. And development comes from our people in the development thing. If this change would have a significant impact, it was just the example of the one, a change of 3. The difference is that what we do is we become unfriendly to developers instead of friendly to developers, and if we get more of a negative aspect there, maybe it will turn off some people so they won't come in. I think we should address the problem in the area where the problem is. If density is a problem, let's talk about density and let's do it. Let's not talk about parking and nominal changes in the parking rules that affect parts of a neighborhood, but then crawl out to the whole city. Because as most of us know, that in business, what you don't want to do is you don't want to spend a lot of time fooling around with variances and coming up with different studies that may or may not be relevant to a project. So I think in this case, in deference to the neighborhood, I would love to see it reduce it, but I think there are some positive things with moving these developments more from the center of the neighborhood out to the edge. You reduce the pressure in the center of the neighborhood and you move it out. Again, just to repeat a couple of the things, a lot of the issues which the people that presented last night were talking about, parking, the cars weren't from the renters in the area, were for people coming in. It was either from the businesses that were there, they were parking from there. So I can't support this at this time because I think we need further study on this, and if we're trying to reduce density, I think we need a better procedure.
Councilmember T-Wall.
Thank you, Council President. You know, this does seem an issue of zoning and planning. Years ago, obviously, the city allowed the planning and parking to grow as it did and not build that infrastructure. It's hard to know what the next 30, 40 years brings. And so we have a residential area, neighborhood that is now crunched with cars. Parking allowed on both sides. Other neighborhoods have parking on one side. Yet we can't wave a wand and just say no parking on this side. That would really hurt that community as well. We also built things like parks and say, come on into the park. And then we didn't really figure where you should park when you come to the park, just not by the park. So we put up that sign. And I teach at the Tech and at one of the multiple campuses. And sure enough, the council even passed some no parking signs. And we have students who trudge through the snow to go beyond the no parking sign and park along the side street so they don't have to buy a parking permit. It is the nature of the beast to be thrift when one can. We also have, while in some spirit I agree with the idea of density and having a community where people can walk to work, love that idea. We have a very sparse employment density. I have students who travel great distances for their work, and they would not be able to bike or walk. Cars are a reality that this current generation and the next will still continue to have. I think a downtown area can be built to do that, but I don't think we can imagine mass transit between Phillips, Wisconsin, and every small town throughout. That is not at our doorstep. So I don't want to make that the guiding principle. I don't think this amendment relieves much in the parking problem. Development has a very long tail. This only affects new development. It will take years for that to take away the stress and load. So I really favor the study, as Councilmember Worthman and Councilmember Von Hayden have mentioned. I think it's time to look at it. And so I love listening and learning, but that's where my views are at this time. Thank you.
And further, Councilmember Beaton.
First, I wanted to thank the Plan Commission and my fellow council members on working on this document. I think that there are a lot of really good changes, especially some that clarify some of the ordinance, and in particular the addition of the sustainable transit demands. I think that's great. However, having lived in the Randall Park neighborhood and in the 3rd Ward and in the North Riverfront neighborhood, some of those years as a student and some of those years not as a student, I had the opportunity to get to know their each neighborhood's issues and parking issues in particular. And coming from that perspective, I still can't support this. I think that it has some serious environmental implications by increasing impermeable surface space. And I just don't think it benefits students like we think it's going to, having that student perspective. I think it also disincentivizes bicycling and using other ways of transporting people, and incentivizes car transportation, which, as we know, is also a negative environmental implication. So let's see. I want to make sure I got everything. I would also be in favor of a parking study and some of the other ideas that have, as well as the overlay district that some of the Councilman Worthman had brought up earlier. I also have an amendment that I've offered at your table, an amendment to the motion. Would this be the right time to offer that? Okay. So my amendment basically eliminates the changes to the bicycle incentive portion of the ordinance. It would replace, or it would reinstate that incentive for developers to install more bicycle parking, especially for students. Commuting by bike is a really big deal. I know that having been a student and seeing the bicycle parking stalls at the university, and so having that additional bicycle parking I think is going to be really good, and to give developers that incentive for installing that much needed bicycle parking space is a good idea.
A motion has been offered that is at your place. I think everyone has it. Is there a second?
I'd be happy to second it.
Seconded by Councilmember Emanuel. Councilmember Beaton has spoken to her amendment and the justification therein, her motion, I mean. Is there further discussion on the motion to amend? Councilmember Mitchell, thank you.
I'll be voting against this amendment. I would remind council that the bicycle parking requirements still stay in effect. It's just the reduction that we're asking to take out. The idea would be that people would ride a bicycle and not have a car. And hence, if you have bicycle racks in the unit, then people would use it and they would not need a parking space. And I think that's just absolutely not the case. People might have a bicycle, but they also have a car. And giving this amount of reduction in parking spaces is a problem, particularly, in units where people don't ride bikes. But all you have to do is put up the racks and you get the reduction. So I will definitely, I think this change that we're suggesting, which is to not have this reduction, is a good one. So I'll be voting no.
Councilmember Strobel.
I'm going to support this, maybe not for the same reasons as it was offered, but I was on the Plan Commission when this bicycle rack ordinance came through, and I voted against it at the time because I think it required bicycle racks at every new business, whether they needed them or not. And like Councilmember Mitchell said, they might not need them. Well, now we're requiring them to build these bicycle racks. I think the Holiday Inn would have been required to have like 100 and some bicycle racks, which to me seems totally unnecessary. So unless the Plan Commission is going to relook at that, I think one of the reasons that it was, I don't know if it was one of the reasons it was supported, one of the reasons that helped the developers there is it did give them an opportunity to at least reduce their required parking based on if they have these bicycle racks. So we're requiring them to have these racks whether they need them or not. And so I think we should at least allow them to get that reduction in parking. So I'll support it.
Further discussion on the motion to amend? There being none, we'll do a roll call vote, Madam.
Councilmember Von Hayden,
No.
Worthman,
Aye.
John,
No.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
No.
Linkhammer,
No.
Larson,
No.
Mitchell,
No.
Strobel,
Aye.
T-Wall.
No.
And that motion fails 7-4. We are back to the ordinance without amendment, and discussion is still in order. The chair will state briefly that I will be supporting the ordinance. I think this is a responsive act on the part of local government to try to relieve parking congestion in a neighborhood that is hurting. And that's how I see it. I see it as a short-term response to a hurting neighborhood, and therefore I'll be supporting the ordinance. There being no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll, and I vote adopts the ordinance. That's before you. Ready?
Councilmember Worthman.
No.
John.
Aye.
Beaton,
No.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Linkhammer.
Aye.
Larson,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel.
No.
T-Wall,
No.
Von Hayden.
No.
And that ordinance is adopted on a 6-5 vote. That brings to a close our work for this legislative session, other than to introduce two ordinances. The first being an ordinance rezoning property at the northwest corner of Menominee Street and Carson Park Drive from P Public to C3P for a tennis center, of which there's been much discussion and will be more. Lastly, we're introducing an ordinance amending Chapter 10.30 of the City Code entitled Right Turns Prohibited at Signalized Intersections by adding Key Street and Brackett Avenue. Does council wish to suspend the rules and take up either item? I see no such desire. Announcements and directives are in order. Excuse me. If I might call on the chief to pay, if you might help me remove the political sign from chambers, as is the code of conduct in chambers. Thank you. Mr. Peters.
I have no announcements tonight.
Okay. Announcements or directives by council members? As you learned in the email today, we did reschedule our work session discussion probably for September 13th. We beg your pardon, we just didn't get the background information ready and out to you. We didn't feel comfortable that you were all ready. So we, the appointments committee, apologize. And we'll, thankfully, you're graceful people.
I, for one, will forgive you.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll be more ready. We'll be more ready next time. Announcement, any other announcements? Yes, Councilmember.
And I take responsibility for that. It was supposed to be at your place last night, and it wasn't, so sorry. Okay.
I'll forgive you too.
I can't let that go. No, that was mine, so sorry about that.
Well, we're all doing a mea culpa here.
Okay. Council President, could I request, because if that would have been like a 24 hours, could I request at least like a 3-day ahead of time? Because I know it's going to probably be a lot of reading.
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Do that. Yeah. Okay. On a motion then by Councilmember Larson, seconded by Councilmember Strobel, this meeting is adjourned without objection.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cvctv.org.